What is the mind? An inquiry into the invisible architect of experience. Have you ever truly stopped and asked, not how the mind works, not what it does, but what it is? Not in the way scientists break it down, not as philosophers dissect its nature, not even as psychologists describe its functions, but something deeper, more intimate, more strange. Because we often collapse three vast distinct realms into one: the brain, the mind, and consciousness. And in doing so, we blur the lines between the physical, the functional, and the phenomenal. The brain is matter, plain and extraordinary matter, a 1.3 kilogram marvel of soft, folded tissue. It is flesh and electricity, neurons firing in precise cascades, synapses bridging chemical messages, blood vessels nourishing silent thought. It is tangible. It is physical. You can hold a brain in your hand, measure its waves, slice it thin and stain it blue, watch it light up in an MRI. It is biological hardware evolution's most intricate machine. But the mind is not a machine. The mind is what the machine does. It is not a thing, but a process, a choreography, a whisper between cells, a dance of data in darkened halls of matter. The mind is not in the brain. It is what the brain is doing when it thinks, when it feels, when it dreams. Just as a melody is not the piano, but the notes it plays. Just as a whirlpool is not the water, but the motion through it. The mind is the software, running on the brain's hardware. It is dynamic, invisible, alive with patterns. It is thought in motion, memory in structure, imagination woven into prediction. The mind is your interface to the world. It is not what you are made of, but what you are made from. And then there is consciousness, more elusive than both, more fragile, more profound. If the mind is the play, and the brain the stage, consciousness is the witness in the audience. Consciousness is not what the system does, it is what it feels like to be the system. It is awareness, presence, the silent eye behind your eyes. It is the shimmer at the edge of thought, the whisper before language, the subtle sense of being alive right now. You cannot find consciousness in a neuron. You cannot scan it, dissect it, or explain it away. It is qualia, the inner glow of experience, the redness of red, the ache of longing, the feeling of being you. And yet, somehow, all three: brain, mind, and consciousness are entangled, interdependent, bound in a mystery that no theory fully captures. The mind sits in the middle, between biology and experience, between structure and sensation. It is the liminal zone where electricity becomes emotion, where sensation becomes perception, where the outer world is modeled, shaped, and made internal. The mind is where life becomes experience. But why did it come to be? Not to write poetry, not to ask questions, not to solve riddles or paint dreams. Those are byproducts. Evolution did not grant minds for beauty or truth. Minds arose for survival, for prediction, for simulation. The first minds were not storytellers. They were simulators. In a chaotic world of claws and shadows, the organism that could picture a future before acting within it had a critical edge, the one that could rehearse. What if the rustle is danger? What if I wait? What if I run? Stood a better chance than the one that only reacted. Reflex gave way to reason. Instinct gave way to imagination. The organism that could hesitate, could map, model, rehearse lived to pass on its genes. This was the evolutionary dawn of the mind, a tool for seeing the invisible, preparing for the uncertain, and learning from the past. But survival was only the beginning. As the brain grew folds and memory deepened, the mind began to exceed its original purpose. It became more than a simulator. It became a storyteller, a stage for creativity, a mirror for the self, a canvas for the imagined. It stopped merely reacting and started reflecting. The mind became a place where the past could be revisited, where futures could be constructed, where identities could be sculpted out of fleeting thoughts. It became a narrator, an editor, a critic, a dreamer. And though the brain remained rooted in matter, the mind began building worlds. Worlds not just of facts, but of meanings. Each mind paints its own private reality, filtered by feeling, tinted by memory, lit by attention. No two minds are the same, not even close. You and I could walk through the same street, see the same sky, hear the same music and walk away, having experienced entirely different realities. Because the mind is a lens, not a mirror. It bends the light of the world around our history, our desires, our fears. And here's the quiet miracle. The mind is not static. It is not a fixed object like a chair or a stone. It is a dynamic system, a self-organizing pattern, a river of becoming. With every experience, the mind reshapes itself. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every memory etches a mark. Every new thought subtly rewrites the code. Every loss leaves a shadow. Every love, a fingerprint. The self you were 10 years ago? Gone. Even the one you were 10 minutes ago is dissolving into something else. The mind, in this sense, is more like a river than a container always flowing, always reforming. It carries your history like silt. It folds moments into memory, turns experience into meaning, and meaning into identity. And still the question echoes, what is the mind really? It's not your thoughts. They come and go. It's not your memories. They blur and vanish. It's not even your identity, that fragile construct you mistake for permanence. The mind is the stage upon which all those things appear, flicker, perform, and fade. It is the invisible architecture of awareness, the scaffolding of the self, the frame in which your entire reality is drawn. You can't see the mind. But everything you see through it. Every emotion you've ever felt, every idea you've ever considered, every face you've ever loved, they passed through this mysterious filter. To understand the mind is not merely to begin a scientific journey. It is to step onto a spiritual path. It is the start of understanding the self, the world, and what it means to be aware at all. It's not just a topic for researchers or thinkers. It's the key to unlocking your own experience of life. To ask, what is the mind? Is to realize that you are not the content of your mind, but the container. Not the actor, but the stage. Not the thought, but the space between thoughts. And from this space arises the possibility of something profound. Choice, freedom, insight. The ability to look at a thought and say, that's not me, that's just a ripple. The ability to see a fear and say, I don't have to obey that. The ability to recognize that the stories we live by can be rewritten because the storyteller is not fixed. The mind, then, is both mystery and mirror. It is what allows you to see, and what you must learn to see through. So next time you sit with your thoughts, don't try to stop them. Don't try to grasp them. Just watch. Let them rise, let them pass. And ask softly, gently, without expectation, what is this? What is the mind that holds this moment? And listen, the answer may not be in words, but in silence, in presence. In the quiet unfolding of being, where did the mind come from? A slow birth of inner worlds. It's one thing to ask what the mind is, to poke at its properties, examine its patterns, to marvel at its strange ability to think about itself. But another question cuts deeper, presses closer to the edge of mystery. Where did it come from? How did this invisible theater of thought, memory, imagination, this shifting cathedral of inner life arise? From the cold machinery of biology? How did the raw matter of nature, indifferent and unconscious, give rise to something that could fall in love, grieve its dead, question its purpose, or gaze at the stars and feel small? At the dawn of life, there were no minds. Just movement, just chemical gradients, just heat and salt and cells. Single-celled organisms drifted through the warm soup of the early earth. They responded to temperature, light, acidity, nutrients. A bacterium would swim toward sugar, away from poison. A paramecium might reverse its direction after bumping into something. But none of these creatures knew they were doing these things. There was no I to narrate the moment. The early living world existed entirely at the surface of sensation. No dreams, no doubts. No models of the world, just stimulus and response, action and consequence. A jellyfish pulses through black water with no concept of the dark. A worm recoils from brightness without knowing what light is. These are not metaphors. These organisms do not reflect. They do not imagine. They do not remember. They live, but they do not experience in the way we do. And yet, over billions of years, something changed. Not all at once, not with a spark or a single leap, but gradually, over time. With each new generation, the rules of survival began to shift. Environments became more complex. Oceans teemed with life. Competition grew fierce. Signals became layered. Sounds echoed. Smells lingered. Shadows moved. And in this complexity, one trait started to rise above the rest: prediction. It was no longer enough to simply react to the world. That took too long. The organism that could anticipate before danger struck, before hunger arrived, before the wave crashed had a powerful edge. Reaction was the past. Foresight became power. And so, slowly, nature began to construct machines that could look ahead not with eyes, but with structure. Enter the nervous system. At first, it was nothing grand. Just a line of connected cells, passing signals from one end of the body to the other. Electrical whispers that said, move, or stop, or danger. But over time, these signals began to converge. Clusters of neurons emerged. Nerve nets gave way to ganglia. Ganglia gave way to centralized brains. As organisms grew more mobile, more complex, more reliant on precise coordination, evolution began sculpting systems capable of holding on to information if only for a moment. Memory took root. Not yet the kind that recalls a first kiss or a dead parent's voice, but the kind that could hold on to patterns long enough to say, the last time I smelled this, it led to food. Go there. Emotion followed. Primitive, blunt instruments at first. Signals for pleasure, pain, attraction, revulsion. Internal systems to guide external behavior, to say, yes, do this again. Or, no, avoid that next time. These were not yet minds, but they were the scaffolding, the soil in which minds would grow. Because minds did not cause brains. Minds emerged from brains when brains reached a certain level of structural and functional complexity. A threshold was crossed. Not a magic line, not an instant transformation, but a gradual folding inward of biology upon itself. Systems evolved not only to sense the outside world, but to model it, to simulate it, to imagine. At that point, minds were born. What is a mind, after all, if not a simulation engine? A virtual space where reality can be tested without risk, where possible futures can be run like tapes, where decisions can be rehearsed before they're made. The creature with a mind could pause, could replay, could forecast, and in a world that punished mistakes, that ability to hesitate and simulate was an evolutionary miracle. But it didn't stop there. Over epochs, evolution continued layering complexity, from sensation to perception, from perception to recognition, from recognition to abstraction, from abstraction to intention, from intention to reflection. Each layer didn't erase the one beneath it, rested upon it. Like geological strata, each generation built on the scars and strategies of the last. An octopus plans escapes. A crow uses tools. A chimpanzee mourns the dead. These are not random behaviors, they are expressions of increasingly intricate minds, each capable of modeling both the external world and the internal one. Because eventually, simulation turned inward, the mind began modeling not just predators and food, but itself. The organism became the object of its own awareness, a flash of metacognition, the birth of the self. This, too, was gradual. A dolphin recognizes its reflection. An elephant grieves. A magpie hides food while watching for observers. These are not simple acts. They are signs of layered minds, aware, in some dim or brilliant way, of their own mind. And that is where the mystery deepens. Because once the mind becomes aware of itself, a strange feedback loop begins. You are no longer just thinking. You are thinking about thinking. And thinking about thinking leads to art, philosophy, religion, dreams, doubts, leads to this very question. Where did the mind come from? The answer is not divine spark or single mutation. It's not magic. It's not even particularly sudden. The answer is recursion, feedback, structure begetting complexity, begetting self-reference. The mind emerged the way a whirlpool forms in a stream not summoned, but allowed, not imposed, but invited by the conditions of the system. When a brain became complex enough to represent the world, and then represent its own representations of the world, mind arose. But we must not mistake this emergence as immaterial. The mind is not a ghost. It is not outside nature. It is the most natural thing of Allah phenomenon, born not in spite of biology, but because of it. A rose emerges from soil, a storm from the meeting of winds, a mind from a living brain. And yet, it feels different. Why? Because minds do not just register the world, they create meaning. They filter the chaos of experience into narratives. They give names to the nameless. They turn a sound into a memory, a pattern into a story, a wound into wisdom. From the outside, a mind is invisible. It leaves no footprints. You can't touch a thought. You can't weigh a belief. But from the inside, it's all you know. The pain of loss, the pleasure of music, the feeling of falling in love. These are not properties of neurons. They are experience sensorial, immediate, rich. And while they depend on neurons, they are not reducible to them. That's the paradox. The mind is of the brain, but not merely the brain. It is the shimmering echo of activity, the ripple of awareness through matter, the story told by 86 billion neurons whispering an electric chorus. And so the mind didn't arrive in a moment. It grew. It grew in the shadows of instinct. It bloomed through countless failures. It evolved by trial, by accident, by necessity. It began as sensation, became perception, matured into prediction, blossomed into reflection. And here we are, creatures made of flesh, blood, and bone asking about things that cannot be seen, wielding minds that think about mind, brains that simulate universes, minds that simulate meaning, and hearts that ache for answers. Where did the mind come from? From life, from complexity, from a universe that, given enough time, began to imagine itself. Why minds were needed. From reflex to reality architects, imagine a world where every action is immediate, where danger appears without warning, where every choice is a reflex, every reaction instinctual. In such a world, life is not experienced, it is endured, lived moment by moment, without foresight, without memory, without pause. The organism sees, but does not look, moves, but does not choose, flees, but does not fear. There is no space between the world and the self, because the self does not yet exist. This is the world before minds, a world governed by raw sensation, stimuli in responses out, light, move toward, heat, retreat, touch, contract, hunger, seek, and it worked. For a time, in a world where danger was sparse, where food was abundant, and where complexity was low, this form of life, simple, reactive, unthinking, thrived. A stimulus triggered a response. Fast, efficient. It was nature's first algorithm, sense and act. But then the world changed. It grew crowded. It grew volatile. It grew layered in ways no reflex could predict. Dangers multiplied, not just in number, but in subtlety. Predators developed camouflage. Prey learned to hide. Signals overlapped. Opportunities became fleeting. The line between safety and risk blurred. And so, reflex once sufficient began to fail. In this shifting world, a new kind of challenge emerged. Uncertainty. And with it, a new kind of solution was needed. Enter the mind. Not as a luxury, not as an intellectual bonus, but as a biological necessity. The mind solved what instinct alone could not. How to survive in a world where not every danger is visible, not every opportunity sensed, and not every reaction leads to survival. The mind did not replace reflex, it built upon it. It added a layer. A space between stimulus and response. A delay. A silence. In that silence, something powerful happened. Imagination. Imagination is not fantasy. It is simulation. And simulation is survival. Where instinct acted blindly, the mind modeled. It rehearsed actions before enacting them. It visualized outcomes before chasing them. It ran experiments, silently, internally. The cost of trial and error was transformed into thought and consideration. The tiger, before pouncing, could now anticipate the prey's escape route. The bird, before flying, could recall where seeds had once been buried. The early human, before building shelter, could scan the sky and foresee the storm. This shift from reactive instinct to predictive modeling was not cosmetic. It was revolutionary, because it introduced something that had never existed before in the animal kingdom: mental time travel. Not literal time travel, but cognitive. The ability to revisit the past, not as a memory fragment, but as a narrative. The ability to project into the future, not as a hunch, but as a possibility. This ability to mentally move through time changed everything. Suddenly, survival was not just about what is, it was about what was and what might be. Creatures could remember mistakes and avoid repeating them. They could delay gratification. They could make sacrifices for long-term gains. They could learn not just from immediate experience, but from imagined experience. This evolution could not do on its own. Genetic memory is slow. The mind, however, was fast. It was evolution's shortcut. Its fast-forward button, its leap from instinct to insight. But the world was not just dangerous, it was social. And sociality brought a new layer of complexity. Now, the organism didn't just have to track the environment, it had to track other minds. What is she thinking? Is he a threat? Can I trust them? What will they do next? Reflex could not answer these questions. Only a mind could. And so, minds evolved not only to model the world, but to model the inner world of others. This capacity is called theory of mind, the ability to attribute mental states to others. It is the foundation of empathy, cooperation, deception, morality, and culture. Without it, no relationship would last. No society would function. No civilization could form. The mind had to become a mirror, not just reflecting the world, but reflecting the reflections of others. It had to simulate intentions, decode social cues, anticipate reactions. It had to navigate trust, betrayal, grief, love. This ability to model minds within a mind was an evolutionary superpower. And it didn't stop there. The mind began to abstract. It could take a specific event, say, being lied to, and build a general belief. People can be deceptive. It could link moments across time and distill patterns. From patterns, beliefs. From beliefs, worldviews. It began constructing frameworks not only about what is, but about what ought to be. Ethics, justice, purpose. These were no longer abstract ideals. They became internal maps for living. Through abstraction, the mind did more than remember it, interpreted, more than predicted, anticipated, more than simulated, imagined. It built systems of meaning, and through language, it shared them. Language was not just a tool, it was an extension of the mind. With it, thoughts could live outside the thinker. Ideas could leap across skulls. Knowledge could outlive its origin. Language created the possibility of collective mind culture, tradition, myth. One person's insight became another's inheritance. One generation's learning became the next's foundation. The mind became transmissible. It could be written, spoken, taught, preserved. This is what made the mind more than a feature. It made it an infrastructure, a substrate for continuity, a container for transformation. And with that came a paradox. Because now, the mind had to maintain the self. Amid the ever-shifting world, new jobs, new friends, new failures, the mind needed to preserve an inner thread, a sense of continuity, of identity. It remembered your name, your story, your wounds, your goals. Even as your cells changed, your memories faded, your thoughts shifted, the mind constructed a coherent you, not fixed, not frozen, but familiar. It created the illusion not of permanence, but of personhood. And as life grew more complex, the mind evolved new roles. It protected itself. When reality contradicted belief, the mind bent perception. It altered memory, rewrote experience, silenced certain truths. Not to lie, but to survive. Cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, selective memory. These are not flaws, they are strategies. Adaptive illusions, psychological immune systems. They allow the mind to remain whole in a fragmented world. They preserve coherence in chaos. And in preserving coherence, the mind could do something extraordinary: create. It turned wounds into wisdom, loss into longing, memory into music. It did not just observe the world, it reimagined it. Through art, story, ritual, and dream, the mind took raw life and sculpted it into something meaningful. It found beauty in decay, order in entropy, hope in despair. It invented futures that had never been, and gave purpose to pasts that never made sense. It became more than a survival mechanism. It became a stage where life could be rehearsed before it was lived, where danger could be faced without dying, where decisions could be tested without consequence, where identities could be worn, rewritten, and rediscovered. So what does the mind do? It senses, remembers, anticipates, decides, creates, heals, distorts, connects. It is not just a thinking engine. It is not just a feeling organ. It is not just a memory bank. It is a reality-building system. It takes photons and turns them into faces, vibrations and turns them into voices, pressure and turns it into warmth. It does not merely reflect the world, it transforms it. And it does so for every single human, every single moment, in ways both miraculous and invisible. You are not living in the world. You are living in a model of the world, one built by your mind, filtered through your past, colored by your emotions, shaped by your hopes. The mind is not just where life is processed, it is where life is lived, and yet it is invisible. You cannot see your mind, but everything you see through it. Every sound, every thought, every feeling passed through this quiet architect, this silent composer, this ancient simulation engine running inside your skull. It is evolution's greatest gamble, its grandest experiment, its most mysterious result. The mind is not a bonus. It was never a luxury. It was evolution's answer to chaos, its strategy for uncertainty, its hack for life. In a world too complex to merely react, a gift, a tool, a burden, a miracle. How the mind creates thought, from silence to symphony thought. It seems so simple, so immediate. A flicker of memory, a surge of insight, the voice that narrates your day, the image that arises behind your closed eyes, the intuition that gently nudges you left instead of right. We hardly notice it happening. A decision forms, a problem is solved, a sentence is shaped before it is spoken. It all feels effortless. And yet, beneath this surface stillness lies one of the most profound phenomena in the known universe: how the mind creates thought from silence. The forest within, neurons and the spark of cognition. It begins invisibly, deep within your skull, protected by bone, wrapped in fluid, bathed in chemistry. Is the human brain a living cathedral of electric whispers, a 1.3 kilogram mesh of flesh and fire. Inside it, nearly 86 billion neurons, each branching outward like trees in an impossibly dense forest. Together they form trillions of synaptic connections, intersections, where messages can leap from one cell to another. Each neuron on its own is silent, but together they hum with potential. A thought begins not as a word, not even as an image. It begins as a spark, an impulse, a burst of electricity. A neuron fires. It sends an electrical charge racing down its axon, like a wave flowing down a wire. When this electrical surge reaches the end of the axon, it cannot jump to the next neuron directly. It arrives at a synapse narrow gap, and there the current transforms. Electricity becomes chemistry. Tiny molecules, known as neurotransmitters, are released into the synaptic gap. They float across like messages in a bottle. When they reach the next neuron, they bind to receptors, opening ion channels and creating a new electrical pulse. That neuron now fires, sending the message forward. This happens not once, but billions of times every second. Thought is not one firework. It is a cascade, not a spark, but a storm. A living circuit comes alive, not in one place, but across many. Different regions of the brain light up: vision, memory, logic, emotional, coming together in a carefully choreographed act of meaning. And this choreography is not random. It is structured. Functional regions, division and unity. The brain is mapped into distinct regions, each with specialized tasks, but none work alone. The occipital lobe processes visual information. The hippocampus encodes memory. The prefrontal cortex plans and reasons. The amygdala processes emotional intensity. The parietal lobe integrates space and sensation. The thalamus filters and relays information. The default mode network activates when your thoughts wander inward. These systems form a conversation, an ongoing dialogue. Thought is not born in a single place. It is the result of these conversations happening in parallel. Your brain, in many ways, is not a single organ. It is a society of mind, a federation of specialized agents, cooperating at extraordinary speed to produce a single moment of awareness. Brain plasticity. Thought shapes structure, and here is where it grows even stranger. Every thought you think reshapes your brain. This is not metaphor. This is literal. Every firing of a neuron strengthens the path between it and others. Neurons that fire together, wire together. This is brain plasticity, the ability of your neural structure to change in response to experience. Every habit you form, every word you learn, every mistake you regret into the network like footprints in clay. Memory is not stored like a file on a hard drive. It is woven into the network by pattern and rhythm. It is recalled by reigniting the same neural dance that created it. So thought is not just ephemeral. It is architectural. Thinking is building. You are, with every idea, laying down new paths in the forest. With every realization, you shape the landscape within. You are not only the product of thought, you are also its author. Rhythm and coherence. The music of the mind. But neurons alone cannot explain thought. Timing matters. Rhythm matters. Enter brain waves, the oscillations that guide neural activity. Measured in hertz, brain waves synchronize distant regions, allowing them to act in concert. Delta waves in deep sleep. Theta waves during meditation or drowsy creativity. Alpha waves during calm focus. Beta waves during active thinking. Gamma waves during moments of insight or complex integration. Without rhythm, thought would collapse into static. The orchestra would lose its conductor. Ideas would collide without coherence. It is this delicate timing, the rise and fall, the pulse and pause that allows the mind to compose thought instead of merely reacting. Thought is not noise. It is music. It is the coordination of fire and wave, of signal and silence. And yet, with all this machinery mapped, all this circuitry charted, we still do not know how thought becomes experience. The hard problem, from mechanics to meaning. This is the mystery that keeps philosophers and neuroscientists up at night. We can trace the path from neuron to neuron. We can measure the chemicals. We can predict behavior from patterns of activity. But we still don't understand consciousness. We don't understand how the firing of a cell results in the feeling of joy. How a sequence of impulses produces the memory of a mother's laughter. How a signal becomes a soul. This is what philosopher David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. Not, how does the brain work? But, why does it feel like anything to be that brain? Why are we not just machines processing information? Why do we feel? Why do we care? No algorithm explains sorrow. No data structure explains love. And yet, somehow, it arises. Out of silence, matter becomes meaning. Out of fire comes fear. Out of rhythm comes reverie. This is the crossing from biology to biography, from chemistry to poetry. It is a mystery, not solved, but lived. Thought as self-simulation. One emerging idea is that thought arises when a system becomes complex enough to model itself. Your brain doesn't just process the world, it processes itself processing the world. This loop of observing observation, of thinking about thought, is called recursive self-modeling, and it changes everything. It gives rise to self-awareness. It allows for introspection. It makes thought dynamic, layered, ever-evolving. You don't just have thoughts, you observe them. You narrate them. You judge them. You think about your thinking. And this recursive loop is the seed of identity. You are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts appear. You are the mirror in which they are reflected. Thought, then, is not a stream, it is a sea. It swells and calms, it rushes and recedes. And somewhere beneath the waves, the mind continues its endless work. The languages of thought, and not all thought is in words. Much of it is preverbal, silent, sensory, an image, a rhythm, a smell that stirs something unspeakable, a pain you cannot name, a hope you cannot articulate. The mind speaks in dialects, in picture, in feeling, in intuition. Words are only one layer, the surface. Beneath them lies a whole universe of thought you cannot translate but still feel. And this silent thought shapes you. It guides your decisions, colors your moods, whispers your dreams. You are not always aware of it, but it is always there. The mind thinks even when you don't realize it's thinking. It calculates in the background. It mulls over memories in dreams. It connects dots while you walk, or cook, or cry. It is not a machine you start and stop. It is an ocean that never sleeps. The thought that thinks of thought. And then, perhaps most extraordinarily, the mind can do this. It can think about itself. It can ask, where do my thoughts come from? Why do I believe what I believe? What is the nature of thinking itself? This recursive gaze turns thought into philosophy, turns biology into wonder. In this act, the mind ceases to be a tool. It becomes a mystery aware of its own mystery. A spark, aware that it burns. A wave, aware that it moves. A mirror, reflecting its own depth. So how does the mind create thought? Through fire and silence, through rhythm and recursion, through connection and chance, through evolution and enigma. It is the most intimate act, and the least understood. A whisper in the brain, a storm behind the eyes, a miracle, born moment by moment within you. And perhaps the greatest miracle is this, that you can stop and wonder, and ask, what is this thought? Where did it come from? Who is thinking it? And in asking, you awaken to what you are. Not just a mind that thinks, but a mind that knows it thinks. A mind that reaches through biology and becomes aware of its own becoming. That is not just thought. That is consciousness thought's highest form, and life's quiet revolution. The long wonder, a history of thinking about thought. The study of the mind did not begin in laboratories, nor under microscopes, nor with control groups, nor data charts. It began in quieter places, beside fires, beneath stars, amid the hush of wind through leaves and the slow turning of time. It began when early humans paused not out of boredom, not for productivity but out of a kind of existential trembling. A moment of stillness when the hunter, the mother, the wanderer stopped, looked at the horizon and then inward, and asked, what is this presence behind my eyes? What is this voice that narrates even when no one is near? What is this flicker that remembers pain, that dreams of tomorrow, that fears and loves and regrets? This was not science. This was wonder. And long before the words psychology, neuroscience, or cognition were spoken into air, there was already inquiry. Not into how the mind functions, but into what it means. Not how the mind works, but why it whispers. Origins in spirit and story. In the earliest human societies, understanding the mind was inseparable from understanding the soul. Ancient humans did not draw a line between matter and meaning. To them, mind was not locked behind the skull. It flowed in nature, in dreams, in rivers and stars. They saw consciousness as shared with animals, with ancestors, with the sky. The wind carried intention. The moon had memory. Rocks could listen. Trees could mourn. From this mystical entanglement came early language for the mind, not technical, but sacred. India, Manas and Atman. As early as 1500 BCE, Vedic texts in ancient India spoke of Manas, the inner faculty responsible for thought, emotion, and perception. It was not the soul, but the instrument of the soul. Later, in the Upanishads, came the concept of Atmanat, a self as ego or identity, but a self as essence, as divine spark. The mind was not seen as personal alone, but as part of a greater unity. To think was to participate in the cosmos. To know oneself was to know the Brahman, the ultimate reality. This was introspection as spiritual awakening. Meditation was the microscope. Stillness was the experiment. Insight was the result. Egypt, Ka and Ba. In ancient Egypt, thought was not reducible to the brain or heart, it was relational. They believed in Kath life force that stayed with the body and bathed part that could fly, travel, visit the realm of the dead. The mind was a composite, as much dream as logic, as much memory as breath. Some preserved the brain in jars, others discarded it, believing thought came from the heart. And yet, in tomb paintings, funerary spells, and ritual chants, one thing remained clear. Something of the person remained after death, something conscious, something thoughtful. Death did not kill the mind. It released it. China, Tao and flow. In ancient China, the mind was not isolated, it was integrated with the world. Taoist thinkers like Laozi and Zhuangzi saw the mind not as a static container but as flow, something to be aligned, not controlled. To think well was not to impose, but to surrender, to follow the Tao, the way. Later Confucian philosophers added structure, seeing the mind as moral, social, and cultivated through virtue. Still, it remained interpersonal, not solipsistic. The mind was woven into ritual, family, and society. Greece. From myth to metaphysics. Around 500 BCE, in ancient Greece, thought turned inward in a new way. Philosophy was born not in books, but in dialogue, in wandering, in asking. Heraclitus and Parmenides. Heraclitus spoke of change, how no one steps in the same river twice. Parmenides spoke of being, how change was illusion and reality eternal. Together they asked, what is the nature of what is? And by extension, what is the mind, if not the one who sees and questions and interprets? Plato, the tripartite soul. Plato imagined the soul divided into three: reason, the charioteer; spirit, the horse of will; appetite, the horse of desire. He placed reason as the path to truth, implying that to understand the mind was to purify it, to unchain it from the cave of illusion. To think was to remember eternal forms. To use the mind was to return home. Aristotle. Observation and categorization. Aristotle, more grounded, saw the mind as a function of the soul. He divided it into perception, memory, imagination, deliberation. The mind was a tool, not a soul itself, but its way of grasping the world. He may have lacked modern instruments, but his observations were often astonishingly accurate. He recognized that the mind is not one thing, but many interlocking faculties. The mind in motion. Buddhism and impermanence. In early Buddhist teachings, the mind was something else entirely, not a thing, but a process, a stream, a chain of momentary events, always changing, never solid. The self was a fiction, a bundle of perceptions, sensations, thoughts, emotions held together by illusion. This was not a pessimistic view. It was liberating. If the mind was not fixed, it could be transformed. If the self was not eternal, it could be released. Mind was not architecture. It was weather, clouds that pass, winds that shift. Islamic Golden Age. Mind, soul, and intellect. Between the 9th and 13th centuries, the Islamic world became a global center of learning. Thinkers like Al-Farabi, Avicenna, Ibn Sina, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, Averroes, asked new questions about the relationship between reason and revelation, body and soul, mind and God. Avicenna proposed multiple levels of soul, including the rational soul, capable of abstraction and eternal truths. He argued that the intellect could transcend the body momentarily, reaching divine understanding. These were not blind beliefs. They were part of a systematic philosophy, incorporating Aristotle, Greek metaphysics, and Quranic theology. Mind was the bridge between material and spiritual, between observation and illumination. Christian Europe. The mind as moral arena. In medieval Europe, the mind became a moral battlefield. Under the weight of Christian doctrine, the mind was seen not just as a faculty of thought, but as the seat of the soul. Free will, conscience, sin, grace, all were tied to the mind's ability to choose rightly. Monks practiced mental discipline. Mystics entered altered states through meditation and prayer. The mind was a window to God, or a temptation of the devil. Either way, it mattered profoundly. The modern break, Descartes and the doubt that split the world. In the 17th century, everything changed. René Descartes, questioning what he could know with certainty, came to a radical conclusion. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. With that, the mind became not just one object of study but the first. All knowledge began with the thinking self. Not with revelation, not with culture, not even with the body. The mind became the anchor of reality. But this brought a split. Descartes separated mind and matter. Res extensa, the extended thing body. Res cogitans, the thinking thing mind. This duality has haunted Western thought ever since. From philosophy to science, the rise of psychology and neuroscience. In the centuries that followed, the study of mind diverged. Philosophers still debated meaning, free will, and consciousness. But a new movement emerged, empirical psychology. Wilhelm Wundt opened the first psychological lab in 1879. William James explored streams of consciousness. Freud proposed unconscious drives shaping thought. Behaviorists like Skinner and Watson dismissed the mind as a black box only behavior mattered. Cognitive science fought back, revealing that minds could be modeled, measured, explained. Then came neuroscience. We began scanning brains, mapping regions, tracing circuits. We saw thoughts light up on screens. We studied memory, perception, language, emotion. What began by firelight now lived under fluorescent tubes and fMRI machines. We moved from myth to mechanism, but we did not escape the mystery. And still we wonder for all our studies. We still don't know why the mind exists. We know it evolved eyes, that it confers survival advantages, that it builds models, stores knowledge, connects people. But we don't know why it feels like something. Why does electricity in a neuron lead to the scent of jasmine, or the memory of a kiss? Why do we not simply compute, but care? Science answers the how, but the mind still asks the why. It wonders. The first question, still unanswered. The study of the mind did not begin with answers. It began with a pause, a silence, a strange awareness of awareness. The moment when the observer turned inward and asked, what is this voice? What is this dream? What is this flicker that looks back at me when I look inside? And though we have given it namasoul, psyche, cognition, consciousness, though we have dissected, scanned, and simulated, we are still asking, still listening to the fire crackle, still watching the stars, still wondering, what is this thing that thinks? What is this silence that dreams? What is this flicker that wonders what it is? The question remains, and the asking is the mind itself, the biology of the mind, flesh, fire, and the birth of thought. When we speak of the mind, we often leap directly into thought, into the swirl of consciousness, the softness of dreams, the spark of imagination. But long before we reached toward meaning, before symbols, stories, or selves, there was something simpler, something older, biology. Beneath every idea, every insight, every wonder we call mind, there is a deeper truth. Life needed to survive. The mind did not arise from philosophy. It was not born from poetry or abstract introspection. It grew from the raw soil of survival carved by evolution, shaped by hunger, fear, heat, cold, and time. The origin of the mind is not a tale of brilliance. It is a tale of persistence. The first flickers, from reaction to regulation. In the beginning, there was no self, no memory, no meaning, no model of the world. There were only cells floating in ancient oceans, responding to gradients of heat and light, salinity and acidity. They did not know. They simply did. Drift toward sugar, recoil from toxin. This wasn't awareness, it was navigation. But it was enough. These primitive responses were the roots of what we now call cognition. They were not thoughts, but they were information. Not choices, but biases toward life. Each twitch was a vote for survival, each avoidance a premonition of pain. As life grew more complex, so did its needs. Single cells became colonies. Colonies became organisms. Organisms needed coordination. And so arose the first nervous system nets of connected cells, able to transmit signals faster than diffusion alone. The jellyfish, with its web of nerve fibers, could now move. The worm, with its primitive clusters of neurons, could learn. These were not yet minds, but they were no longer purely instinctive either. They could process. The earliest forms of what we now call thinking were not thoughts at all. They were refinements of reaction. They were speed, efficiency, a way to respond before dying. The brain as an evolutionary layer cake. Over millions of years, evolution did not design the brain, it layered it. It did not begin with intelligence. It began with regulation. At the core of the modern brain lies the brainstem, the oldest part. It handles the essentials: breathing, heartbeat, digestion, sleep. This is life support, not introspection. Above it lies the limbic system, which manages emotion, reward, fear, memory. The limbic brain does not speak in words. It speaks in feelings, sudden, visceral, immediate. And then, wrapping over it all, is the neocortex, the crowning jewel of mammalian evolution. Here we find logic, language, abstract reasoning, planning, imagination. But these layers do not work in isolation. They are not like floors of a building. They are like strata in motion, each layer reacting, informing, and competing with the others. In any moment, one layer may dominate. A loud bang? The limbic system flares before logic catches up. You duck before you think. You survive before you understand. Reason arrives late, but it interprets. It tells the story of your reaction and calls it a decision. The brain is not a brain alone. We often speak of the brain as if it is separatea, control tower, aloof, above. But this is an illusion of language. The brain does not float in thought. It is soaked in flesh, embedded in breath, rooted in the blood. Every idea you have passes through embodiment. This is the principle of embodied cognition, that thought does not happen in spite of the body, but because of it. Your back pain changes your worldview. Your hunger makes you impatient. Your posture shifts your confidence. Your breath alters your belief. The body is not a container for thought. It is a co-author of it. Two-way traffic. Body and brain in dialogue. The communication between brain and body is not one way. It is a loop. A racing heart sends signals upward. Something is wrong. The brain interprets the beat as fear, even if the cause is unclear. The gut, often called the second brain, holds hundreds of millions of neurons. It doesn't just digest food, it influences mood, anxiety, even memory. Hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, oxytocin, and dopamine regulate not just physiology but emotion and thought. Adrenaline sharpens attention in crisis. Cortisol stretches time in moments of fear. Oxytocin binds us in love and trust. Dopamine reinforces motivation and reward. These are not chemicals in the background. They are editors of perception. Your internal state is not a passive backdrop. It is the canvas on which thoughts are painted. The immune system and mental fog. Even the immune system plays a role in the mind's biology. Inflammation in the body can cause mental fog, depression, fatigue. Chronic illness can reshape personality, reduce memory, cloud emotion. There is no clean divide between mental and physical health. The mind is not above the body, it is within it, made of it, dependent upon it. Every feeling you've had was shaped by a cocktail of chemicals. Every decision sculpted by neural rhythms. Every moment of clarity made possible by the absence of inflammation, exhaustion, or pain. Plasticity, the brain that rewrites itself. And here's the marvel. The brain is not fixed. It is not a circuit board etched at birth. It is a living architecture. It is soft, rewritable, alive. This is neuroplasticity. Neurons that fire together wire together. Memories etch new paths. Trauma forges shortcuts. Learning prunes old connections, builds new ones. You are not just experiencing your life. You are rewiring your mind with every moment. Thought is not just process, it is construction. The brain is a sculptor sculpting itself. And every feeling, every conversation, every repetition or interruption leaves a mark. Even the absence of stimulation can change it. Loneliness shrinks regions related to empathy. Chronic stress erodes memory. Safety nurtures learning. Love thickens the cortex. The brain responds to the story it lives in. Emergence. From structure to self. And from this swirling, synchronizing, metabolizing system emerges something miraculous. You, not the parts, not the circuits, not the cells, but the experience of being. This is emergence. The idea that complex systems give rise to properties no single part contains, just as hydrogen and oxygen form water, which is wet though neither atom is. Just as ant colonies solve problems that no ant alone can, the brain and body together produce a mind that none of their parts contain. Your memory is not in one neuron. Your sadness is not in one synapse. Your consciousness is not in one cell. It is in the pattern, in the timing, in the cooperation. The mind is not a ghost in the machine. It is the machine, alive. So, what is the biology of the mind? It is not just a brain. It is not just tissue. It is tempo. It is touch. It is timing. It is rhythm and reaction, feedback and fire, structure and storm. It is a spinal cord carrying messages like a river of light, a cortex layering logic over instinct, a limbic system flooding thought with feeling, a body echoing back its state, a hormonal system tuning mood like a song, an immune system casting clouds or clearing skies. It is breath becoming thought, posture becoming belief, gut feeling becoming conviction, heartbeat becoming fear or courage. The mind is not separate from the body. It is the body, awakened. It is flesh, dreaming. It is not ethereal, but emergent. Not static, but sculpted. It is not separate from the processes. It is made of them. Every thought you've ever had, every dream you've ever dreamed, was written in the alphabet of electricity and chemistry. But those sparks created stories. Those pulses created people. Those circuits gave rise to choice. And in the miracle of emergence, the machine became aware of itself. And in becoming aware, it asked, "What am I?" And that question, that single, trembling, biological thought, is the mind. The chemistry of the mind. Molecules that move meaning. Every thought you've ever had, every whisper of memory, every spark of joy, every sudden stab of grief has been steeped in chemistry. Beneath the pulsing neurons and electrical flashes, beneath decisions and dreams, beneath the quiet rhythm of consciousness itself, flows a slower, more fluid language. The language of molecules, invisible, intimate. These molecules do not shout. They whisper. They linger. They saturate. They do not think, yet they shape how we do. They do not feel, yet they tint the edges of every feeling. While neurons crackle and circuits hum in milliseconds, chemistry moves like weather, slow, heavy, persistent. It colors the mind's landscape. It tilts the emotional ground beneath your feet. It leaves fingerprints on everything we call experience. This is the chemistry of the mind, not a static formula, but a living tide, adjusting moment by moment. The synaptic symphony, neurotransmitters at work. At the heart of this molecular dialogue are neurotransmitter chemical messengers that leap across tiny synaptic gaps between neurons. A single neuron sends an electrical signal down its axon until it reaches the synapse. There, the message becomes chemical. Molecules are released into the synaptic space. They float, bind, activate, or silence the next neuron. Each neurotransmitter carries its own tone, its own signature emotion, intention, or instruction. Let us meet them. Dopamine, the currency of anticipation. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but this is an oversimplification. Dopamine is not the signal for having something, it's the fire that burns when you almost have it. It's the tension in pursuit, the thrill of the chase, the gleam of a possibility just within reach. It surges when we set goals, when we crave, when we anticipate reward. It's what keeps you checking your phone, what fuels addiction and ambition alike. It is not contentment, it is compulsion. Dopamine trains attention toward what the brain believes is valuable, but it doesn't care whether that value is nourishing or destructive. This makes it powerful and dangerously neutral. Serotonin, the architect of stability. Serotonin is more subtle, more diffused. It does not spike with sudden pleasure. It flows slowly, shaping your emotional baseline. It regulates mood, appetite, sleep cycles, social confidence, and body temperature. When serotonin levels drop, the world feels muted, colors dull, meaning fades. Not because the world has changed, but because your chemistry no longer amplifies it. SSRI, Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor SER, designed to extend serotonin's life in the synapse. They don't inject happiness. They make it possible again. Norepinephrine, the call to alertness. Norepinephrine is the brain's alarm bell. It prepares the body for challenge, heightens vigilance, sharpens focus. It is the lens that zooms in on what matters. It pushes the periphery into the background. In the right amounts, it is clarity. In excess, it becomes hypervigilance. Sleep vanishes. Relaxation becomes impossible. The world becomes a series of threats. This is what anxiety feels like. A mind flooded with norepinephrine, trapped in a loop of readiness. GABA, the quieting force. To counter that readiness, we have GABA-gamma aminobutyric acid. If norepinephrine is the gas pedal, Georgia BA is the brake. It slows activity. It softens excess. It turns down the volume of looping thoughts. It creates space, mental silence, emotional room. Many anti-anxiety medications work by enhancing GABA's activity, not to sedate the mind but to make it breathable again. Endorphins, pain's disguised twin endorphins, are the body's natural opioids, released during pain, laughter, exercise, orgasm, and moments of deep emotional resonance. They mute suffering. They create temporary euphoria. They are not reward, they are relief. A runner's high, a sobbing laugh, a hand held during grief. These experiences are not just emotional, they are chemical storms that say, you are safe now. Hormones, the body's emotional climate. If neurotransmitters are the brain's chemical whispers, hormones are its chemical broadcasts traveling through the bloodstream, shaping mood, memory, and motivation from head to toe. Cortisol, the long shadow of stress. Cortisol is the stress hormone, and in short bursts, it's essential. It prepares the body for challenge, mobilizing energy, increasing glucose, heightening arousal. But when cortisol remains elevated through chronic stress, trauma, or relentless pressure, it begins to erode. Memory weakens, sleep fragments, emotional resilience collapses. Long-term cortisol exposure shrinks the hippocampus, the region responsible for memory and learning. This is why stress feels foggy, why grief feels like forgetting. It is biochemistry thinning the bridge between experience and meaning. Oxytocin, the chemistry of trust. Often called the love hormone, oxytocin is released during physical touch, childbirth, orgasm, and social bonding. It softens defenses, increases trust, heightens empathy, makes us more generous and more tribal. It binds lovers, connects parents to children, but it can also amplify in-group bias. Oxytocin is not good or bad. It is the chemistry of connection, for better or worse. Testosterone and estrogen, more than sex. These are not just male and female hormones. They exist in all bodies and influence a wide spectrum of mental states. Testosterone, linked to assertiveness, risk-taking, competitiveness, and even depression in low levels. Estrogen, involved in memory, mood regulation, sensitivity to reward and social behavior. Their fluctuations during menstrual cycles, puberty, pregnancy, and menopause dramatically alter mood, focus, and emotion. These are not character traits, they are endocrine tides reshaping cognition. Chemical feedback loops. Thought, molecule, thought. The relationship between chemistry and thought is not linear. It is recursive. A single fearful thought can raise cortisol. Elevated cortisol can increase anxiety. That anxiety increases fearful thoughts. This is the loop. A circle where chemistry responds to perception and then shapes perception in return. Breaking this loop is the heart of therapy, whether through behavior, talk, movement, or medication. Hope, too, has chemistry. The placebo effect, long dismissed as just belief, now shows measurable changes in brain activity. To believe a pill will help activates the same pathways as the pill itself. Expectation becomes chemical architecture. Faith becomes physiology. The mind does not merely think, it listens, and it alters itself in response. Imbalances. When chemistry tips the mind. When this molecular web becomes tangled, the effects are often dramatic and misunderstood. Depression is not just sadness, it can be serotonin depletion, dopamine suppression, or chronic cortisol elevation. Anxiety may stem from GABA insufficiency or excess norepinephrine, mania from dopamine overload, emotional numbness from endorphin resistance. These are not moral failures. They are chemical states. They are not fixed, but they are real. We are not wrong to feel this way. We are wired this way for now. And wires can be rerouted beyond the brain, gut, genes, and plasticity. Recent research reveals even more complexity. The gut microbiome produces many neurotransmitters, including serotonin and GABA. Your digestion affects your disposition. The bacteria in your gut may influence your mood, your risk for depression, even your cognitive function. Meanwhile, epigenetics shows that experience alters gene expression. Trauma can switch genes on or off. Meditation can reduce inflammation at the molecular level. Gratitude can increase dopamine receptor density. These are not metaphors. They are measurable effects. So what is the chemistry of the mind? It is not just a soup of neurotransmitters. It is a dynamic ecosystem, a conversation between cells, signals, memories, and environments. It is dopamine chasing dreams, serotonin building calm, norepinephrine scanning for danger, GABA creating quiet endorphins, muting the ache of being alive, cortisol stretching time in moments of stress, oxytocin flooding the heart with openness, and belief reshaping it all. This chemistry does not diminish the mystery. It deepens it, because somehow, from these molecules, arise laughter, longing, language, memory, forgiveness, art, identity. The mind is not made of chemicals, but it is inseparable from them. And sometimes, the smallest molecule can steer the largest feeling. The brain is made of matter of cells, molecules, membranes, and proteins folded with exquisite precision, but the mind? The mind is not static substance, but motion. It is the flicker of an idea before language wraps it, the bloom of memory that has no physical shape, the ache of longing, the rush of decision, the quiet presence of awareness unfolding moment by moment, like a living equation. The mind is not a thing, it is a process, a rhythm, a choreography, a state of organized change. And if the mind exists within the fabric of the universe, if it arises from the same primordial field that birthed galaxies, black holes, and hydrogen atoms, then it must obey the same fundamental laws that govern all things that move, form, unfold, and fade. Physics is the study of how systems transform. It tells us how mass bends space, how light travels in waves and particles, how time warps near gravity, how entropy unravels order, and how energy shifts and stabilizes across the infinite complexity of forms. Physics, at its essence, is the mathematics of change, and when we turn this lens not outward to distant stars or inward to tiny quarks, but to the internal theater of thought itself, we begin to ask, if the mind is real, then what is its physics? We begin with energy. Though the brain constitutes only 2% of the body's weight, it consumes around 20% of its energy supply. Every thought, no matter how small or fleeting, is costly. It begins with a change in electrical potentiale, tiny ions shifting across a membrane, creating a spark. That spark travels down the length of a neuron, triggers neurotransmitter release into the synapse, and prompts the next neuron to fire. But these cascades are not mind in themselves. Electricity flows through copper wires and lightning storms, but it does not think. What matters is how energy is organized, how it is patterned. Thought is not just heat or charge it, is energy encoded in time, synchronized across systems, filtered through networks that remember, compare, and predict. In this way, thought is more like a waveform, an oscillating, structured configuration of physical energy dancing across billions of interacting elements. And so the mind arises not from energy alone, but from its orchestration. This brings us to the language of information. In 1990, Physicist John Archibald Wheeler proposed a provocative phrase, it from bit. That is, at the deepest level, the universe may not be made of matter, but of information binary choices, differences, decisions, and distinctions. Yes, no, on, off, here, there. In this view, reality itself is constructed not from particles but from answers to questions. If this is true, then thought is not some strange biological anomaly. It is a continuation of the universe's fundamental logic. It is information looping back on itself. The mind becomes a self-referential field of distinctions, a system, not just observing patterns, but producing them, restructuring them, simulating them. Your brain, then, is not simply a tangle of flesh. It is an information processing machine, capable of modifying its own code. Your memories are compressed data encoded in biological form. Your identity is a recursive algorithm shaped by feedback, reweighted by prediction, and informed by context. The mind is the story the data tells itself, about itself, updated with every breath, every surprise, every new variable. But even information obeys physical laws. In particular, it contends with entropy's tendency for systems to drift from order to disorder. Over time, patterns degrade, coherence decays. A broken glass does not reassemble itself. A stirred coffee does not unmix its cream. Entropy is not chaos. It is the default drift of isolated systems toward uniformity. And yet the mind seems to resist this pull. It remembers. It organizes. It models and corrects and refines. Every thought you think, every memory you retrieve, every pattern you notice is a local reversal of entropy. But this reversal is not free. It costs energy. It burns glucose. It takes cellular effort. To think clearly is to spend molecular currency. To sustain attention is to temporarily hold back the tide of disorder. Your ability to focus, to understand, to create coherence in the midst of chaos is nothing less than thermodynamic resistance, biological rebellion against dissolution. Some neuroscientists and physicists suggest that what we call consciousness may emerge from a particular kind of information structure, one that is both highly integrated and highly differentiated. In physics and neuroscience, this idea is formalized in Giulio Tononi's Integrated Information Theory, IIT. According to IIT, a conscious system is one where information is so deeply interwoven that it cannot be reduced without loss. The more unified and complex the network, the more phi it contains a proposed measure of integrated information. In this view, consciousness is not located in any one part of the brain, but in the interdependence of its parts. The mind becomes a field of interactions, a system where the whole is more than the sum of the pieces. Consciousness, then, is not simply the output of processing. It is the form the integration itself takes. It is what happens when information becomes inseparable from itself. And then, at the edges of physics, we find the quantum question, the realm where matter behaves not as certainty, but as probability, where particles exist in multiple states until measured, where entanglement connects particles across space without apparent cause. Some theorists have speculated that certain quantum effects might play a role in consciousness. The orchestrated objective reduction theory, proposed by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, suggests that quantum computation might occur within microtubulin structural proteins within neurons. If consciousness arises in part from quantum coherence, it could explain why subjective experience feels unified, non-local, and irreducible. Critics argue that the brain is too warm, too noisy for sustained quantum effects. But the idea remains provocative, because if mind does depend, even in part, on quantum processes, then it may exist at the boundary between the classical and the probabilistic, between the visible and the indeterminate. It may operate not just in 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, but across possibility itself. Even without invoking quantum mysticism, physics gives us powerful metaphors. We can think of thought as a field, a pattern of influence, extending over time and structure, or as a phase state, a momentary configuration of brain activity analogous to liquid freezing or water boiling, or as a dynamical system, constantly in flux, responding to input, searching for equilibrium. In this framing, the mind is like weather, turbulent yet lawful, sensitive to small changes, shaped by initial conditions and feedback loops. It follows nonlinear causality. Tiny shifts can lead to large effects. This is why a single word, a single memory, a subtle expression on a face can transform a mood, trigger a spiral, alter a belief. And still, all of this energy, information, entropy, coherence, field dynamics remains rooted in the material. The mind, no matter how transcendent it feels, is not detached from the laws of motion, conservation, and thermodynamic cost. A thought is not magic. It is a temporary arrangement of particles, an evolving state of a physical system, a ripple in an electrochemical ocean that has evolved the capacity to simulate, reflect, anticipate, and question. It is the same universe that spins neutron stars and folds proteins, now folding upon itself in awareness. To think is to participate in physics. It is to run an experiment across the invisible, using a body as the lab and attention as the lens. So, what then is the physics of the mind? It is not separate from the rest of reality. It is the application of the same universal rules to a more complex canvas. It is energy organized in high-dimensional space, giving rise to prediction. It is matter remembering its own path. It is entropy being momentarily denied through thought. It is the interaction between system electrons and ideas, impulses and inhibition. It is cause and effect, friction and flow, chaos and coherence. It is the arrow of time etched into awareness. It is light, slowed into comprehension. It is nature becoming self-aware. The physics of the mind is not just a way to reduce thought to measurement. It is a way to honor that thought belongs not outside the world, but within it, that it is not alien to the cosmos, but a product of its depth. The mind is not a rupture in natural law. It is what happens when laws grow dense enough to wonder. The universe is not watching us, it is watching through us. In the fluctuations of charge, in the geometry of connection, in the slowing of decay into meaning, in the quiet thunder of a single realization, the laws that shape galaxies are now writing poetry in gray matter. And this moment, when you pause to ask how thought works, when you wonder if awareness is energy patterned into coherence, is itself a physical event, a shift in molecular structure, a state transition, a spike in a neuron, a change in informational entropy. You, reading this, are the physics of the mind made manifest. You are not merely obeying the laws, you are rephrasing them. You are not apart from the unfolding cosmos, you are its echo. You are its simulation. You are its song. Consciousness, the great shimmering mystery at the center of every life. Not simply thought, not merely sensation, but the raw, inexplicable fact that anything is experienced at all. That pain is not just detected but hurts. That color does not just register on rods and cones but glows in the mind's eye. That music does not merely vibrate the eardrum but moves the heart. This mystery, undeniable presence of subjective awareness is not a small puzzle at the edge of understanding. It is the core question, the light behind the eyes, the silence beneath the noise. No mathematical equation, no detailed MRI scan, no theory of cognitive function has yet captured the simple, immediate truth that we are not just processors of information. We are feelers of it. We do not merely compute or respond, we experience. We are experience. And that reality more intimate than our names, more immediate than breathe us, where the true enigma begins. Where does this feeling come from? How does the machinery of flesh and bone give rise to the fire of being? Many answers have been proposed, many frameworks laid out, but all begin in the same tangled jungle, the human brain. Beneath the skull, nestled in the wet folds of cortex and spine, neurons spark with voltage, ions shift, circuits hum, networks pulse in organized chaos. Sensory data flows in, the scent of rain, the flash of a stranger's eyes, the ache in the back, the memory of a kiss. These inputs are parsed, categorized, evaluated for relevance, for threat, for meaning. But they do not simply pass through like numbers in a calculator. They are integrated, woven into a continuous narrative, shaped by past experience, colored by emotion, aimed toward prediction. Somehow, out of this particular rhythm of firing, a distinct flow of signals, A synchrony between distant brain regions. Consciousness appears, not as a blur of noise, but as the vivid, structured feeling of now, as a moment of awareness held in clarity. Some neuroscientists believe this act of integration is the key to consciousness. According to integrated information theory, the mind emerges not from isolated signals, but from their depth of interconnection. The more tightly interwoven the information, vision communicating with memory, sound coordinating with emotion, touch synchronized with attention, the richer the conscious moment. If signals remain disconnected, fragmented, they remain in the dark, unconscious. But when they bind, when they cohere into a multidimensional whole, they light up into presence. Consciousness, in this view, is the binding of experience into a unified field. This explains why strokes or lesions in the brain can fragment awareness, why dreams can feel disconnected, why the mind can seem to fade during trauma or anesthesia. When integration collapses, so too does the conscious sense of self and world. Another theory, the global workspace theory, frames consciousness as a kind of internal broadcasting system. According to this model, much of the brain operates in parallel, silently and unconsciously. Countless processes unfold beneath awareness, regulating heartbeat, scanning the periphery, suppressing irrelevant memories, adjusting balance, filtering noise. But when a specific pattern or thought reaches a threshold of relevance, it wins a kind of competition and is broadcast across the brain's global workspace. In that moment, it becomes conscious. Like a spotlight in a vast, dark theater, it illuminates a single scene for the whole system to see. You become aware of a sound, a thought, a feeling, not because it was created then, but because it was selected for conscious amplification. Consciousness here is not the whole of the mind, it is the small slice that has access to the microphone, the narrator who can speak across all channels. Yet for all these models, for all the progress in mapping, measuring, modeling, one question remains untouched. Why does any of it feel like anything? Why do signals not simply pass in silence? Why does perception include presence? Why isn't the brain just a dark calculator crunching inputs and outputs without experience? This is the so-called hard problem of consciousness, famously articulated by philosopher David Chalmers. It is not a problem of mechanism but of meaning. Not how the brain processes light, but why light feels bright. Not how sound waves are decoded, but why music feels like sorrow or joy. Why matter, when arranged in a particular way, becomes not just alive, but aware. This is a question that science cannot yet answer. Perhaps it never will. Because the problem is not about observable behavior or brain function, it is about subjectivity, about qualia, raw texture of experience. What it is like to taste strawberries, to feel shame, to recognize yourself in the mirror and know, this is me. Science can describe the mechanics, but it cannot yet explain why it matters. One answer is that consciousness is an emergent property. Just as wetness emerges from water molecule as no single H2O molecule is wet, but together they flow, so consciousness may emerge from the collective behavior of neurons. A single neuron is not aware, but a network, sufficiently complex, sufficiently recursive, becomes a mind. This analogy is compelling, but emergence, while helpful, still does not explain why or how subjectivity arises. Another theory posits that consciousness is not emergent, but fundamental, not produced by the brain, but revealed through it. In this view, mind is not something added to matter, but something already embedded in it. Consciousness is as basic as space, time, mass. It is a property of the universe, a field that suffuses all things. The brain, then, is not a generator, but a receiver, a tuning device that shapes and channels a universal awareness into a particular, localized experience. This is the view of panpsychisma philosophy, both ancient and modern. It echoes the Vedic notion of Atman, the Buddhist concept of pure awareness, and the quantum mysticism of some contemporary thinkers. It suggests that consciousness is not the outcome of complexity, but its source. Yet another perspective grounds consciousness in self-modeling. That is, a system becomes conscious when it gains the ability to represent not only the world, but itself. when the brain not only maps external events but also simulates its own responses, intentions, limitations. This creates a strange loop, a system observing itself, observing. The result is self-awareness. This may be why mirror recognition, autobiographical memory, and introspection are hallmarks of higher consciousness. When a system folds in on itself, when it becomes both subject and objected, seems to wake up, to say, I am. And yet even this is not the whole story, because the raw awareness of being a baby's first sensation, a silent moment of a wean's, no conceptual self to exist. It simply is. That presence, wordless and vast, is consciousness in its barest form. Beyond all these theories, there is the testimony of contemplative traditions, mystics, sages, and meditators, who have long claimed that consciousness is not a property of the mind or the body but the ground of being, that it is not something we have, but something we are, that awareness is not in the world is in awareness. In these traditions, the mind is a mirror, reflecting sensations, thoughts, and images, but the mirror itself, the knowing, silent presence behind it, Alice untouched. It is called Atman, Rigpa, Turiya, pure awareness. It cannot be located in space. It has no weight, no color, but it is the most intimate thing we know. It is the field in which all things arise and pass. In meditation, in deep stillness, in altered states of consciousness, people often report encountering this field directly, a state beyond thought, beyond self, beyond time, a luminous, boundless presence that feels more real than anything else. Science often sets such accounts aside, yet they persist, across cultures, across centuries, suggesting that whatever consciousness is, it is deeper than thought, more primal than identity. So, where does consciousness come from? Perhaps it is built from the bottom up, from cells to circuits to networks to awareness. Perhaps it is discovered from the top down, from universal mind to embodied expression. Perhaps it is both. A bridge between biology and mystery, a process that emerges in form but transcends it in feeling. What is clear is this: consciousness is not an illusion. It is not an epiphenomenon, not a side effect, not a trick. It is the most immediate and undeniable fact of existence. Before any belief, before any theory, before any measurement, there is this: the awareness of this moment, the presence reading these words, the field in which thoughts appear, the light behind your eyes. You are not merely a machine interpreting data. You are the experience of that data. You are not a ghost in a body. You are the body made aware. You are the question that can ask, what am I? And in that question, in that wonder, the mystery continues to unfold. Consciousness is not a light switch. It does not simply flick on or off, like the flip of a button separating being from non-being. It moves in waves, in gradients, in thresholds that blur and shift with time, attention, and awareness. It rises and falls like breath. It deepens like dusk and brightens like dawn. It is not a singular event, but a layered phenomenon in ocean with a churning surface and silent depths. There are times when it seems sharp, clear, laser-focused, and others when it drifts, scatters, dissolves into a fog of feeling, a blur of images, a dream without anchor. To ask how many levels of consciousness exist is not simply to map the layers of the brain or tally the stages of awareness. It is to ask how many ways the self can wake up, how many thresholds the mind can cross, how many windows can open within the same house. At its most basic, consciousness begins with wakefulness, the capacity to be aware of the external world, to sense stimuli, to respond in real time. This primal awareness, shared by humans, dogs, birds, even insects, is the foundation upon which all higher functions rest. It is the difference between sleep and alertness, between a light on and a light out. But this baseline is only the beginning, a platform rather than a pinnacle. From mere wakefulness arises the next level: attention. Attention is not simply being aware, it is selecting among the infinite flood of input. It is the spotlight that turns the vastness of reality into a manageable frame. While wakefulness is passive, attention is sculpted. It filters, chooses, enhances. It creates focus. Where we place our attention determines not just what we notice, but what we experience as meaningful. It is the lens that narrows the chaotic wide angle of perception into something graspable. This level of consciousness shapes learning, memory, and decision-making. It is attention that allows a child to fixate on a mother's face, a musician to lose themselves in a single note, a monk to watch the breath like the rise and fall of the tide. Yet attention is not purely conscious either. It can be hijacked by noise, captured by trauma, manipulated by design. In the age of algorithms, attention is currency. But to attend is not yet to reflect. Above attention lies self-awareness, the capacity not only to sense the world, but to sense oneself within it. This is the mirror stage, the moment the mind turns inward and recognizes itself as a subject, not merely a sensor. With self-awareness comes identity, memory, narrative. The self becomes a time linear me who was here yesterday, who plans for tomorrow, who desires, regrets, hopes, fears. The mind doesn't just know, it knows that it knows. It is from this level that we construct personal meaning, track our growth, ponder mortality. Self-awareness enables us to simulate future possibilities, to model consequences, to hold complex intentions across time. It is what allows us to write poetry, tell stories, build civilizations. It is also what enables shame, guilt, pride, and nostalgia. Yet self-awareness is not always present. It can vanish in trauma, fragment in dissociation, or soften in flow. We are not always fully here, even when we think we are. Beyond the self lies social consciousness, the awareness that other minds exist, and that they too think, feel, suffer, and hope. This is the foundation of empathy, morality, cooperation. It is the bedrock of human relationships. Theory of mind, the cognitive ability to attribute mental states to others, emerges around age 4, when a child first understands that someone else might believe something false, feel something hidden. From this awareness, all social dynamics unfold: compassion, betrayal, justice, forgiveness. Social consciousness is not universal. It varies in depth and reach. Some people extend it only to their family or tribe. Others stretch it to strangers, animals, ecosystems. The expansion of this level determines the scope of our ethics. It is what separates cruelty from kindness, isolation from connection. Without it, we build prisons. With it, we build community. It is also what enables social shame, conformity, and manipulation. It is double-edged. It gives us love and war. Interwoven with these layers is emotional consciousness, the felt sense of significance. This level does not just register that something happened, it feels the weight of it. Joy, sorrow, fear, awe, these are not passive reactions. They are signals that something matters. Emotional consciousness shapes memory, often more than logic does. It marks certain events as unforgettable. It influences choice, values, relationships. Emotions can rise from below consciousness and pull the rest of the mind into their orbit. Grief can cloud perception. Love can heighten awareness. Anxiety can shrink possibility. To be emotionally conscious is to feel the coloring of experience not as raw data, but as a story written in the language of the heart. One level further is meta-consciousness, awareness of awareness. The mind steps outside itself and watches its own flow. It notices its judgments, its habits, its compulsions. It sees thought as thought, not as truth. This is the basis of mindfulness, meditation, wisdom traditions. It is what allows one to pause before reacting, to reflect before speaking, to notice the inner critic and ask, is that really me? Meta-consciousness is rare in ordinary life, but can be cultivated. It is fragile, but powerful. It creates space between stimulus and response. It allows suffering to be witnessed rather than obeyed. It is the mind seeing itself as process. And in that seeing, something shifts. Control softens. Compassion arises. Identity becomes flexible. Some describe it as standing on the banks of the river of thought instead of being swept away by it. Beyond meta-consciousness lie transpersonal states, moments in which the boundary between self and world dissolves. These are often brief, but deeply transformative. In these states, there is no longer a subject observing an object. There is only being, presence, stillness, unity. The body fades. The name is forgotten. What remains is awareness without form. These states are described across cultures and religions. The samadhi of yogic meditation, the nirvikalpa of Advaita Vedanta, the beatific vision of Christian mystics, the fana of Sufism. They often arrive after long inner practice, but can also occur spontaneously in nature, in crisis, in birth, in death. While difficult to explain, they leave a lasting imprint. They suggest that the deepest level of consciousness is not an exalted version of thought, but the absence of division, not knowing more but being less. These states challenge the idea that consciousness is in the self. They suggest instead that the self is in consciousness. And then there are altered state streams, trances, psychedelic journeys, fevered hallucinations. These are not levels on a ladder, but side paths, spirals, temporary shifts in perspective. Lucid dreams show the mind that it can create worlds indistinguishable from waking life. Psychedelics disrupt ordinary boundaries and introduce archetypal images, synesthesia, ego, death. Trance states shift agency to something deeper, stranger, older. All these states reveal that consciousness is not a fixed point, but a field, a canvas that can be warped, saturated, or emptied in infinite ways. They show that reality is filtered, not absolute, that what we call normal is a consensus, not a limit. From a clinical and neurological standpoint, consciousness is not binary. The brain does not simply wake up or shut down. There are shades and fragments: coma, vegetative states, minimally conscious states, locked-in syndrome, anesthesia, brain death. Each reveals that consciousness is a spectrum, that awareness can dim without disappearing, fragment without ending. Some patients in vegetative states show responses to music, recognize family voices, cry without memory. Others return from near death with vivid accounts of places and presences not found in scans. These cases remind us that we still do not fully understand what consciousness is, let alone how to measure it. Developmentally, consciousness also unfolds in stages. A newborn lives in raw sensation. Over time, patterns emerge: recognition, intention, self-concept. Children pass through stages of moral reasoning, cognitive abstraction, emotional regulation. Adolescents begin meta-thought. Adults integrate complexity or fail to. Elders sometimes transcend ego. Consciousness grows not just in depth, but in width. It expands its reach, includes more of the world, holds more contradiction, loves more freely. But trauma can freeze it. Culture can narrow it. Fear can fracture it. Consciousness is not guaranteed to grow. It must be invited to grow. And now, in the age of artificial intelligence, we ask whether machines can become conscious. If consciousness is merely computation, then perhaps yes. If it is embodiment, then perhaps no. If it is rooted in suffering, love, death, hope, then something essential may be missing. Still, AI teaches us something: that intelligence is not the same as awareness. A machine can solve problems, generate art, write poetry. But does it know it is doing so? Does it feel? We do not yet know. And in that uncertainty lies a mirror, for we still do not fully know how we ourselves feel. So how many levels of consciousness are there? There may be as many as there are ways of knowing, as many as there are inner landscapes, as many as there are hearts. Consciousness is not a staircase. It is a continent, a vast terrain of valleys and peaks, rivers of memory, deserts of silence, forests of emotion. Some regions are mapped, others remain myth. Some are accessible daily, others only through crisis, devotion, or grace. The deeper we go, the stranger it becomes. Some levels feel ordinary, others are unspeakable, and each one reveals a truth: that we are not static beings, but shifting presences. That to be alive is to be in motion not just through the world, but through ourselves. And within every level lies a deeper mystery: that we know we are alive, that we remember, that we imagine, that we grieve what hasn't happened yet, that we look into our own eyes and ask, who is asking? That we can trace thoughts, feel feelings, dream dreams, and still wonder what lies beyond them. The question is not merely how many levels exist, but how many we have touched, how many we have avoided, how many remain waiting just beneath the surface, just beyond language, just inside the next breath. Across the vast diversity of species, cultures, languages, and brains, one haunting question persists. Are there universal laws of minds? Beneath all the difference between humans and animals, between individuals and societies, is there a common architecture, a shared foundation? If minds are shaped by evolution, forged by biology, and tuned by experience, then perhaps certain rules, like gravity, apply everywhere thought arises. To ask this is not to erase difference. It is to search for harmony beneath dissonance, for constants beneath variation. Just as water finds its shape in every vessel, yet always flows, perhaps mind follows laws invisible, yet consistent rules that govern not the content of thought, but the conditions under which thought can arise. The search for these laws begins with pattern. All known minds, whether in octopuses, crows, elephants, or humans, process information. They gather input from the world, organize it internally, and use it to make decisions. Perception becomes prediction. Sensation becomes strategy. This process sense, integrate, actus, a fundamental rhythm, a cognitive loop as universal as breathing. It is not intelligence in the abstract, it is the architecture of attention. Another law may be economy. Minds, like all complex systems, conserve energy. The brain favors efficiency. It builds habits. It simplifies the complex. It relies on shortcut heuristics that allow fast decisions with minimal effort. These patterns of conservation shape how we learn, how we bias, how we default. Sometimes this leads to brilliance, sometimes to error, but the law holds. Given limited energy and time, the mind optimizes. There is also the law of plasticity. Minds are not marble, they are clay. Synapses strengthen or weaken. Neural maps shift with use. This law governs learning, memory, recovery. It ensures that no mind is fixed, that experience rewrites the self again and again. A lesson learned, a trauma endured, a language acquired, all are traces of this fundamental flexibility. Another principle, anticipation. Minds do not simply react, they predict. From insects to primates, brains constantly simulate what might happen next. Prediction allows for survival, for planning, for imagination. It is the root of expectation, of disappointment, of surprise. The mind is a machine not of reaction, but of forecast. Then there is attention itself. It is not a passive window, it is an active filter. The mind cannot attend to everything, so it chooses. That choice shapes consciousness. Attention binds features into wholes. It selects the signal from the noise. It determines what becomes thought, what fades into background. Emotion, too, obeys rules. It prioritizes relevance. Not everything matters equally. The mind colors experience to reflect value, what is safe, what is dangerous, what is meaningful. Fear sharpens focus. Joy invites repetition. Sadness slows movement. These responses are not random. They are regulatory signals, shaping how attention is used, how memory is stored, how decisions unfold. Then there is the law of self. All complex minds seem to develop some model of self, whether a bird recognizing its reflection or a human crafting an autobiography. The self is a useful fiction, a center of gravity for thought and action. It allows coordination over time, continuity of memory, protection of body. It may not be real in a metaphysical sense, but it is functional, and that function appears again and again. Communication emerges as another universal thread. Whether it's pheromones, gestures, language, or song, minds reach outward. They share, they influence, they synchronize. Communication allows for cooperation, teaching, deception, and culture. The rules of communication signal, encoding, decoding, feedback are found wherever minds interact. There are also boundaries. Minds are limited. Attention is finite. Memory is flawed. Processing speed is constrained. These limitations are not failures, they are features. They shape how minds evolve, how they specialize. A mind cannot do everything, so it learns to focus, to filter, to choose. Even conflict follows law. Competing drives fear and curiosity. Caution and ambition create tension within the mind. This internal conflict, this push and pull, is not chaos. It is a dynamic balance, a negotiation that guides behavior. It gives rise to internal dialogue, to moral reasoning, to self-correction. From these patterns emerge laws not in the strict mathematical sense, but as principles, predictable tendencies, foundational properties. They do not dictate what any one mind must do, but they describe what most minds tend to do. They form a grammar for cognition rules from which infinite expressions can arise. And yet, not all minds are alike. The mind of a whale is not the mind of a bat. The mind of a child is not the mind of a poet. Diversity is not noisite, is richness. But even in that richness, the deeper you look, the more echoes you hear. The same needs, the same fears, the same yearning to be seen, to be known, to make sense of the world. The search for universal laws of minds is not just scientific. It is philosophical, spiritual, existential. It is the search for what we share beneath culture, beyond species, across time. It is a reminder that while each mind may feel alone, it is part of a lineage, a web, a structure, not a solitary spark, but a thread in a vast unfolding tapestry of thought. So are there universal laws of minds? Yes, and they whisper in every thought, every dream, every fear, every bond. They are the shared breath of all who've ever wondered what it means to be alive. The mind is vast, but it is not infinite. For all its wonder, for all its capacity to reason, remember, and dream, it moves within limits boundaries, shaped by biology, history, culture, and time. The mind is not a god. It is a structure, a rhythm, a dance of matter, and it is shaped as much by what it cannot do as by what it can. First, there is the limit of attention. You cannot focus on everything. The mind selects, narrows, filters. This is not a flaw, it is a feature. It allows depth in place of overwhelm, but it also means that most of the world remains unseen. You notice a face in the crowd, but miss the 1,000 others. You follow one thought and lose another. The conscious mind is a narrow beam in a darkened room. Then there is memory. We believe we remember accurately, but memory is not a recording. It is reconstruction. Every time you recall, you reshape. The past is not preserved, it is retold. Details drift. Emotions color facts. Context blurs events. The mind forgets. And sometimes it invents. Perception, too, is bounded. Your eyes see only a thin sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. Your ears hear a narrow band of sound. What you call reality is a filtered Verjona translation, tailored for survival, not for truth. You do not see atoms. You do not hear the spin of electrons. The world is more than the mind can grasp. There are also emotional limits. The mind wants coherence, but emotions are turbulent. You try to reason while angry and find logic slips through your fingers. You seek clarity in grief and find fog instead. Emotion is not weakness, it is signal. But it can drown the signal it is meant to carry. Cognitive limits run deeper still. The brain uses shortcuts. It guesses. It fills in gaps. It prefers familiar patterns. These tendencies help with speed, but not always with accuracy. Bias creeps in. Prejudice forms. Certainty replaces curiosity. The mind is not an impartial judge, it is a meaning maker, and sometimes a fiction writer. Then there is the problem of self-reference. The mind can think about anything, even itself, but in doing so, it creates paradox. You cannot fully observe the observer. You cannot step outside your own awareness. The snake that bites its tail becomes a circle, not an answer. Some mysteries stay unsolved because the solver is part of the mystery. The mind also faces the horizon of death. It can imagine infinity, but it cannot grasp its own ending. It can simulate time, yet remains trapped in the now. It can dream of other lives, other worlds, but it wakes again in the same body. Mortality is not just a physical truth, it is a cognitive one. It shapes every hope, every fear, every story. And yet, for all these limits, the mind remains extraordinary. It knows it has boundaries and tries to cross them. It senses its edges and tries to reach beyond. It builds language, art, science, philosophy not because it already knows, but because it yearns to. So what are the limits of mind? They are many. They are real, but they are not failures. They are the scaffolding that gives mind its form. And the most human thing of all may be this: to live within those limits and still ask what lies beyond them. We speak of the self as though it were a thing, a core, a center, a soul. We say, I am, and mean something enduring, something that looks out through our eyes, that remembers our past, that chooses our path. But what is this self, really? Is it a solid truther, a useful illusion? The idea of self begins with continuity. You wake each day with a sense of being the same person. You carry memories, desires, habits. You recognize your face in the mirror, your name on a letter. But the body changes. The cells replace. The brain rewires. The mind forgets, adapts, dreams. So what exactly is staying the same? Is the self a stable identity, a story held together by fragile threads? In neuroscience, the self is not one thing. It is a construction, a pattern created by many processes working together: memory, sensation, emotion, narrative. Different parts of the brain contribute. One tracks your physical position. Another stitches stories from your past. Another filters emotion. Another anticipates outcomes. The self is the convergence of these parts into a single stream of awareness. Not a single voice, but a choir. But that stream can split. In split brain patients where the corpus callosum connecting the two hemispheres is severed, two distinct centers of consciousness can emerge. Each half can have preferences, even perceptions, unknown to the other. Where, then, is the unified self? If awareness can divide, is selfhood an illusion of wholeness? The illusion deepens when we consider how thoughts arise. You don't choose your next thought. It appears. You don't command your emotions. They surge. You don't select your impulses. They emerge. And yet, the self claims authorship. It says, I decided. But neuroscience shows the brain acts before the conscious mind claims credit. The self is not the origin. It is the narrator explaining choices it did not make. This aligns with insights from ancient philosophy. In Buddhism, the self is seen as impermanent, a bundle of processes, not a substance. It is called anatta, not self. Clinging to the illusion of a fixed self, they say, causes suffering. Letting go of that illusion brings freedom, not detachment from life, but from the compulsive identification with thought. Hindu thought, in contrast, speaks of Atmana, self deeper than ego, one with the universe. In this view, the illusion is not self itself, but the idea that self is separate. The true self is not the voice in your head. It is the awareness in which that voice arises, the silent witness behind the noise. Western philosophy has wrestled with the self in its own ways. Descartes declared, I think, therefore I am, placing self in thought. Hume disagreed. He looked within and found no self, only perceptions flickering like shadows. Kant argued that the self is the condition for experience, not something we experience itself. Modern psychology often sees the self as a schema model we build to navigate the world, shaped by experience, culture, and language. Still, the illusion of self has power. It provides coherence. It enables responsibility, ethics, memory, planning. The self acts as a center of gravity for thought. Without it, we might drift. With it, we endure, even if the thing enduring is more like a flame than a stone. Some neuroscientists call the self a controlled hallucination, a model the brain builds, updates, and believes in. Like the image your eyes build from scattered light, the self is an image the brain builds from scattered inputs. It is real in the way a rainbow is real, visible, felt, but dependent on conditions. Yet illusion does not mean useless. A mirage may be a trick, but it still reflects the sun. The self may be a fiction, but it is a fiction that feels, loves, weeps, and wonders. It may be composed of echoes, but those echoes build bridges between lives. They write poetry, create art, forgive mistakes. The illusion creates meaning. Perhaps this is the paradox of the self. that something so unstable can feel so central, that a phantom can weep, that a pattern can love, that a shifting story can stand at the center of a life. So what is the self, and is it an illusion? Perhaps it is both. A necessary illusion, a construction that allows for continuity in a world of change, a mask worn not to deceive, but to connect. And behind it, perhaps, is something quieter, still, something beyond identity and beyond name. Not the character in the story, but the light that watches it unfold. Not a thing, not a name, just this moment, noticing itself. To understand another mind, to see the world through their eyes, to feel their sorrow as your own, to glimpse their fears and hopes without distortiones, one of the deepest longings of human experience. We reach for it in friendship, in love, in empathy, in art. Yet we remain always sealed within our own skulls, each mind encased in its private chamber of perception and memory. So the question lingers: can one mind truly understand another? At the surface, it seems possible. We share language. We read expressions. We nod in sympathy. We say, "I know how you feel," but what we really mean is, "I have felt something like it." Not the same pain, not the same memory, a resemblance, an echo. Even in our most intimate relationships, we interpret rather than experience. We imagine rather than inhabit. This limitation is not failure, it is the structure of consciousness. You cannot step outside your own awareness. You can only project, infer, and guess. You build models of others based on your own past, your own emotional palette, but their mind is not yours. It has its own history, its own wounds, its own silent logic. And yet, something astonishing happens. These projections often work. Despite the walls, we glimpse each other. A single look can carry understanding. A gesture can convey grief. Music can translate emotion across centuries. Stories allow us to simulate lives we've never lived. In these moments, the gap narrows. You feel known. You feel seen. Not because your mind has been entered, but because it has been mirrored. Neuroscience shows that when we observe someone else in pain, the same regions of our brain activate as if we were in pain ourselves. Mirror neurons, they call them. Our biology leans toward empathy. We are wired to resonate, to feel with. Still, resonance is not unity. No two minds are shaped alike. Even twins, raised in the same home, carry different maps of the world. Understanding is always partial, always filtered, always touched by the limits of language, the bias of memory, the noise of assumption. Philosophers have long wrestled with this. Wittgenstein warned that no private language can be fully translated. Simone Weil wrote that attention, pure, undemanding attention, is the closest we come to understanding another, not through claiming knowledge, but through silent witness. So perhaps the goal is not perfect understanding, but authentic connection. Not to merge minds, but to bridge them. To say, not "I know exactly how you feel," but "I am here with you." To listen without rushing to interpret. To witness without reshaping. Art helps. Poetry compresses the inexpressible into something shareable. Music bypasses logic and speaks directly to the limbic mind. Through these, we share texture. Through stories, we share structure. Through empathy, we share space. Can one mind truly understand another? Perhaps not completely. Perhaps never without distortion. But the effort itself is sacred. The attempt to reach, to translate, to feel with this is what binds us. Not perfection, but presence. Not certainty, but care. And maybe, in the quiet space between your thought and mine, something true can still be felt. Truth. A word spoken with certainty, chased with desperation, defended with passion. It sits at the center of every argument, every conviction, every prayer. But what does it truly mean to call something true? Is truth a mirror of reality or merely its shadow? Can truth exist beyond perception, untainted by belief, unbent by culture? To believe in objective truth is to assert that there are facts, immutable and independent, that remain unchanged whether we observe them or not. That water boiled before we had names for temperature. That stars were born and died in silence before a single human eye looked up. that the structure of DNA and the laws of gravity were in place long before anyone wrote them down. Science, in its best form, stands on this foundation. It seeks not what we want to be true, but what is. It assumes a reality that can be probed, measured, repeated. It demands evidence, prediction, falsifiability. A scientific truth is not true because we like it. It's true because it works. Across cultures, under pressure, over time. Gravity does not care whether you believe in it. It will still pull you down. And yet, the deeper one walks into science, the more its limitations become clear. Instruments are extensions of human senses. Equations are born from human assumptions. Models simplify complexity. The telescope does not show what is it, shows what it is built to reveal. We see light, not dark matter. We hear frequencies within a narrow band. We map only what we can name. Even data praised, as spurious interpreted through human lenses, framed by hypotheses, biased by expectation. Objectivity is a direction, not a destination. It is pursued, but never perfected. Even quantum physics, at the edge of empirical knowledge, suggests a strange paradox, that the observer affects the observed. That reality may be contextual. That truth, far from being fixed, dances with measurement. Philosophy presses further. It asks if we can ever get outside our own minds. Every observation is filtered through a brain, shaped by memory, mood, bias, culture, language. Even logic requires axioms, truths we cannot prove, only accept. Even math, the supposed pinnacle of objectivity, has its limits, as Gödel demonstrated. No system can prove all its truths from within. There is always a frame, a boundary, a blind spot. And language or tool for expressing truth is not truth itself. It is metaphor, approximation, symbol. The map is not the territory. We may point to the moon, but some will stare at the finger. Meaning shifts. Words drift. I say freedom. You hear chaos. I say truth. You hear threat. Our attempts to name reality are always mediated by culture, by trauma, by hope. And so, the claim to possess the truth becomes dangerous. History shows this. Crusades were fought for truth. Empires rose on it. Genocides were justified by it. Whenever truth is wielded like a sword, someone bleeds. And yet, to say truth is complex is not to say it is nothing. Some truths do endure. The chemical structure of water, the principles of thermodynamics, the expansion of the universe. These truths are not created, they are discovered. They do not waver under opinion. They do not yield to ideology. They are indifferent, but powerful. And they reward the curious. At the same time, there are subjective truths, real but not universal. The pain of heartbreak, the joy of reunion, the fear of failure. These truths live in minds but shape entire lives. They may not be measured by instruments, but they move people to act, to cry, to sing. Dismissing them as just feelings misses their weight. The memory of a parent's death, the ache of longing, the thrill of creation, these are truths that matter, even if they cannot be proven. Between the subjective and the objective lies a third realm, intersubjective truth. Truth shared and sustained by groups. These are the truths we agree upon. That a dollar has value. That a red light means stop. That laws should be followed. These truths are not physical, but they are real. They exist in behavior, in systems, in collective belief. They build nations, start wars, hold marriages together. They are fragile, but powerful. They require agreement and fall apart when consensus breaks. The value of currency, the legitimacy of governments, the morality of war, these truths are as solid as the faith behind them. They are not illusions, but neither are they eternal. They are contingent, historical, emergent. So, is there such a thing as objective truth? Yes, but it must be approached humbly. It cannot be possessed, only pursued. It does not come as thunder, it whispers in careful observation. And even then, it arrives through a mind shaped by fear, memory, need. The deeper truth may be this, that objective truth exists, but we access it incompletely. That our maps are not wrong, but partial. That doubt is not betrayal but devotion. The search for truth, then, is not conquest. It is pilgrimage. It is the slow, uncertain walk towards something that may never fully reveal itself but transforms us along the way. And that is the point. Not that truth belongs to us, but that we belong to it. At the intersection of this search stands one of the oldest and deepest questions. What is the mind? The philosophy of mind stands at this very crossroads where ancient metaphysics meets modern neuroscience. It does not only ask how the mind works, it asks what the mind is. Is it substance? Process? Illusion? Mystery? Descartes, centuries ago, separated mind from bodyers, cogitans from res extensa, thinking substance from extended substance. This dualism still haunts us. We speak of mental and physical as if they were separate worlds, yet science increasingly suggests they are not. Monism asserts that only one substance exists, either material or mental. Physicalism argues that mental states are just brain states, that thoughts, feelings, intentions all arise from neurons, chemicals, circuits. In this view, the mind is what the brain does. But this raises questions. If the mind is the brain, can it be copied, simulated, transferred? Functionalism says yes, that what matters is not the substance, but the function, that mental states are defined by what they do, not what they're made of. This opens doors to artificial intelligence. The idea that a sufficiently advanced machine could think, feel, decide, but could it suffer? Could it love? Is consciousness simply the output of computation, or is it something more? That is where we meet the hard problem of consciousness. David Chalmers phrased it best. Why does experience feel like anything? Why does seeing red or tasting salt come with qualia subjective texture? The brain processes inputs. But why do those processes become experiences? Some think science will eventually explain qualia. Others turn to panpsychism's idea that consciousness is a fundamental property of matter, like mass or spin, that the universe itself is, in some way, awake. This idea, once fringe, is now debated by physicists and philosophers alike. But whether you accept it or not, the question remains, why does anything feel? And what kind of system can feel? The philosophy of mind also wrestles with the question of identity. What makes you you? Is it memory? Continuity? DNA? The soul? John Locke said memory creates identity. If you remember being the child in the photo, you are the same person. But memory can fade, distort, or lie. Others suggest identity is a stable pattern of traits, behaviors, or neural configurations. Still, others argue there is no core self, only a bundle of perceptions, stories, simulations. The Buddhists have long said this, that the self is not a thing, but a processive verb, not a noun. Then comes the question of free will. If the brain is a physical system, subject to cause and effect, where is choice? Is every decision a result of prior states? Is the sense of agency an illusion? Determinism says yes, that we are sophisticated puppets. Compatibilism softens this, arguing that freedom doesn't mean randomness, but acting in accordance with your own reasons. Libertarians argue that true freedom must include unpredictability, a gap in causality. Neuroscience complicates this. Studies show brain activity before the conscious decision to act, but interpreting these results is tricky. Does readiness potential cause action or merely precede awareness? The philosophy of mind also reaches into dreams, language, and mental illness. It asks, what is a dream? A simulation? A narrative engine? Are dreams windows into the unconscious or just neural noise? Language shapes thought, but does it limit it too? Can a person without a word for regret still feel it? And what of psychosis, dissociation, or depression? Are these malfunctions or alternate states of consciousness? Do they reveal the fragility of the mind or its depth? And now, in the age of generative AI, the questions multiply. Can a chatbot be conscious? Can an AI feel pain, or only describe it? What does it mean to simulate a mind? If a machine passes the Turing test, acts like us, speaks like us, learns like us. Should we treat it like us? The line between simulation and sentience is growing thin. And behind that line is a mirror, reflecting back our own uncertainty about what we are. Phenomenology adds another voice. Thinkers like Husserl and Merleau-Ponty suggest that mind and world are not separate at all, that experience is a co-creation, that we do not passively see the world, we live it. The body is not a container for the mind, but its expression. Consciousness is not a screen, but a touchpoint. The mind is not inside the skull, it is in the world. Every perception, every memory, every desire is shaped by context, gesture, habit. The world is not out there. It arises with the self. In the end, the philosophy of mind is not just about thought. It is about what it means to be, to hurt, to hope, to love, to imagine. It stands not as a solved puzzle but as a deepening mystery. It does not seek certainty, but insight. It holds space for paradox. The brain is matter, but the mind is meaning. Neurons fire, but so do fears. Chemicals flow, but so does awe. We are biological, but we ask questions that biology alone cannot answer. To think about the mind is to use the mind to stare into the very instrument of inquiry. It is like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. And yet we try, because something in us yearns to know, not just what the mind does, but what it is, and what that means for what we are. The dreaming mind, silent, secret, strange. When the body sleeps, the mind does not vanish. It shifts. It enters a new landscape, one unbound by the laws of gravity, time, or logic. In this place, mountains dissolve, strangers become friends, fears speak in symbols, and the impossible feels real. Dreams are not merely noise, they are messages in the language of the unconscious. But what exactly is the dreaming mind? In waking life, the mind is tethered to the senses, to causality, to the measured logic of day. But in sleep, the tether loosens. The external world fades, and the internal world rises. The dreaming mind does not invent, it reassembles. It draws from memory, emotion, sensation. It weaves fragments of the day into stories. It stirs old fears, forgotten faces, unfinished thoughts. It is a theater where the conscious mind is both audience and actor. Unaware, it is dreaming until the curtain lifts. Scientifically, dreams are most associated with REM sleep, rapid eye movement, when the brain is active but the body is paralyzed. During REM, neural patterns mirror those of waking consciousness. The visual cortex lights up, the limbic system flares, and the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and self-awareness, dims. The result? Vivid imagery, strong emotion, and a loosening of rational structure, a perfect storm for imagination. But the dreaming mind is not chaos. It follows its own logic, a symbolic, emotional logic. Freud saw dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, where repressed desires disguise themselves in narrative. Jung believed they expressed archetype-pressured symbols drawn from the collective psyche. Others argue that dreams help consolidate memory, rehearse danger, or process emotion. Whatever the mechanism, dreams are more than random flickers. They are structured experiences shaped by meaning. The dreaming mind is also a paradox. It creates a world and forgets it. You wake, and the dream slips away like mist. Why? Because the brain does not prioritize dream memory. It encodes only what seems relevant to survival. And yet, some dreams linger. A nightmare from childhood, a vision of flying, a recurring image that returns night after night. These dreams seem to tap something deeper, something unresolved. Lucid dreaming pushes the boundary further. In lucid dreams, the dreamer becomes aware. The mind recognizes the illusion while still within it. Here, the dreamer can act with intent, shape the dream, speak to its figures. It is a state of consciousness within sleep, a strange, hybrid awareness. It suggests the mind can learn to watch itself, even in its most surreal state. There is also the question of creativity. Many great ideas have emerged from dreams. The melody of a symphony, the structure of a molecule, the solution to a problem that resisted waking logic. The dreaming mind is not bound by convention. It plays freely, makes new connections, sees with fresh eyes. It is a source of insight, not because it is irrational, but because it is differently rational. In dreams, the self is fluid. You may be yourself or someone else. You may shift age, gender, form. Identity becomes a costume. This hints at the constructed nature of the self. It suggests that what we call I is more flexible than we think. That consciousness can wear many masks 7 in the same night. The dreaming mind is also a healer. It reprocesses trauma, simulates confrontation, rehearses escape. It allows what cannot be faced in waking life to be expressed in code symbolic, cryptic, but cathartic. Grief becomes a dialogue with the departed. Anxiety becomes a falling sky. Dreams translate pain into image and let the mind speak what words cannot hold. In some traditions, dreams are more than psychological events. They are spiritual ones. A dream may carry prophecy, insight, visitation. Indigenous cultures often treat dreams as part of a larger reality one, where the boundary between the inner and outer worlds dissolves. The dreaming mind, in this light, is not less real than waking thought. It is another path to truth. And perhaps the most profound aspect of the dreaming mind is its reminder that consciousness is not singular. It has layers, modes, colors. Waking, sleeping, dreaming, each reveals a different truth. Each shows the mind's capacity to create worlds, to feel without stimulus, to know without knowing why. So, what is the dreaming mind? It is the mind freed from daylight, the mind turned inward, a storyteller, a mirror, a guide. It holds the memories we cannot name and the truths we dare not speak. It wanders while we rest, and in its wandering, it shows us who we are beneath reason, beneath language, beneath the mask of day. The dreaming mind is not an escape from reality. It is a different way of knowing it. Why does the mind dream? Why, in the silent hours of sleep, does it conjure worlds of strange logic, forgotten faces, impossible events? What purpose, if any, does dreaming serve? These are not idle questions. They strike at the core of evolutionary mystery. If dreaming has endured, it must offer something, some benefit, some survival value. So why did evolution give rise to dreaming? To begin, we must consider what evolution favors: traits that increase an organism's ability to survive, reproduce, and adapt to its environment. Sleep itself presents a paradox. It renders creatures vulnerable, motionless, blind, unaware. Yet it is nearly universal in the animal kingdom. And embedded within sleep, especially REM sleep, is dreaming. The first theory suggests dreams serve a role in memory consolidation. During REM, the brain replays, reorganizes, and strengthens neural patterns laid down during the day. It reactivates circuits associated with learning and integrates new experiences into long-term storage. Dreaming may be the subjective echo of this processor, awareness catching glimpses of the mind's quiet reordering. But dreaming does not merely store memories. It transforms them. It abstracts, combines, edits. It links the trivial with the profound. This creativity may offer an evolutionary edge. By recombining familiar elements into novel scenarios, the dreaming mind may enhance problem-solving, inspire innovation, and foster adaptability. It allows the mind to simulate alternatives, explore what-ifs, and rehearse future actions in a low-risk environment. Another theory emphasizes emotional regulation. Dreams often process intense feelings: fear, grief, desire. The dreaming brain reactivates emotional circuits in a safe internal space. Nightmares, though painful, may serve to desensitize or prepare the sleeper for danger. The amygdala, responsible for fear response, is highly active during REM, while the rational prefrontal cortex rests. The result is emotion, without reason, an emotional storm that slowly clears. Dreaming may also support social cognition. Many dreams involve other people conflicts, conversations, reconciliations. This could reflect the brain's effort to simulate social scenarios, test reactions, and improve empathy. Social intelligence is crucial in group-living species, and dreaming may help fine-tune these skills. It provides a rehearsal space for the complexities of alliance, competition, and trust. Some researchers suggest dreams are a kind of virtual reality, the brain's ancient training ground. Like a flight simulator, The dreaming mind lets us practice without consequence. We face predators, relive traumas, confront dilemmas. In dreams, we can fail without cost, adapt strategies, and prepare for challenges we may never consciously anticipate. This would explain the evolutionary persistence of dreaming even across vastly different species. But not all dreams are rehearsals. Some are surreal, symbolic, or seemingly meaningless. Here, we enter the realm of the mind's deeper layers. Carl Jung believed dreams draw from the collective unconscious archetypal patterns inherited across generations. From this perspective, dreams are more than rehearsal. They are communication between ego and soul, between surface and depth. Evolution may have favored dreaming not just for survival, but for integration, for wholeness. Lucid dreaming introduces yet another evolutionary puzzle. In lucid dreams, the dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming and can sometimes control the dream's direction. While rare, this suggests the dreaming brain retains a form of meta-awareness. Could this self-awareness within dreams be an evolutionary precursor to mindfulness, to metacognition, to conscious reflection? Still, others argue that dreams have no purpose. They are epiphenomena byproducts of a brain in rest mode, idling, cleaning, recalibrating, like static on a screen. But this view struggles to explain why dreaming is so structured, so vivid, so emotionally charged. Random noise rarely feels so meaningful. Perhaps evolution did not give rise to dreaming with a single purpose, but with many overlapping ones. Dreams may be memory's sculptor, emotion's balm, creativity's playground, the mind's mirror. They may be remnants of ancient instincts and seeds of future insight. What evolution selected was not dreaming itself, but the architecture that allows ITAN dreaming emerged as a luminous byproduct, a byway of mind that turned out to matter. So why did evolution give rise to dreaming? Because minds needed more than logic. Because survival required more than wakefulness. Because the night is not empty, and the sleeping mind is not still. Dreaming is not an escape from life, it is a hidden part of how we live it. Language is more than words. It is more than grammar, more than vocabulary, more than syntax carved into sound or squiggle. Language is the architecture of thought, the invisible scaffolding upon which the mind suspends its meanings. It is the bridge between our inner world and the outer one, a delicate, intricate bridge made of sound, breath, and symbol. It is the net we cast into the abyss of raw sensation, hoping to pull up something we can name. The mind without language is not a blank slate, is a storm of impressions, a silent chaos. Language gives that storm shape. It gives it rhythm. It makes it navigable. Without language, the mind exists. Yes, but it exists in fog. With language, the fog begins to lift. Shapes emerge. Stories form. And the self begins to see itself. At the most fundamental level, language is a tool of representation. It allows us to encode the vastness of experience into manageable forms. The rustle of leaves becomes wind. The sting of absence becomes grief. The complex blend of sensation, memory, and emotional timbre is distilled into single syllables. Blue, sweet, pain. These words are not the things themselves. They are not the wind, the grief, the bluebud. They are the tokens we use to summon them into awareness. Without such tokens, thoughts would remain tethered to the moment immediate but unshareable. A pain without a name can only be felt. A pain with a name can be remembered, discussed, studied, soothed. Language allows us to step back from immediacy and carry experience forward. In this way, language enables memory to become narrative. The past, without language, is a blur of sensation. But with language, it becomes structured. Events have cause and effect. Emotions have origins. People have roles. We tell stories not just to others, but to ourselves. We use language to make sense of what happened, to decide what it meant, to shape who we are. This is when I learned. That was when everything changed. The raw facts of the past are filtered through the net of language, sorted and ranked, painted with meaning. And so, we do not merely remember, we interpret. We construct. Just as language shapes memory, it also sculpts the future. It allows for planning, for intention, for the formation of goals and promises. Through language, the future becomes more than a guess, it becomes a map. I will go. You will see. These phrases take fleeting anticipation and lock it into a framework. Language allows us to delay gratification, to sacrifice now for later. It permits coordination across time, and it is this capacity to imagine the future and bind ourselves to it that underpins civilization. A contract is language. A constitution is language. A marriage vow is language. Our collective stability is built on shared symbols that reach beyond the moment. But language is not only personal, it is profoundly social. It connects minds. It allows the private universe of one consciousness to flow into another. Through it, we share ideas, persuade others, teach children, tell jokes, offer comfort. Language turns isolation into community. It transforms individual insight into cumulative culture. Without language, knowledge would vanish with the knower. With language, it can be passed, stored, built upon. Ideas can evolve. Arguments can be tested. Empathy can expand. Language is not merely communication. It is communion. It is how we know we are not alone. And the way language is shaped by culture and shapes culture in return cannot be overstated. The words we use are born from histories, environments, beliefs. The Inuit have many words for snow. The Himba people of Namibia categorize colors differently than Westerners. In some languages, objects are gendered, influencing how speakers perceive them. Bridges described as feminine in one language may be called beautiful and elegant, while in another language they are strong and rigid if considered masculine. This is not random. This is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in action. The idea that language does not merely describe reality, but shapes it. If your language has no future tense, research suggests you may save money more easily. If your language requires precise directionality, you may develop better spatial awareness. Words carve channels in the mind, and the mind flows through them. Language, therefore, is not just a mirror of thought, it is a mold. It determines not just what we can say, but what we can see. Some languages do not have a word for guilt. Others lack a direct translation for privacy. What is not named can become what is not noticed. And so, language is not neutral. It does not merely reflect our reality, it highlights, it omits, it assigns weight. A politician may describe a protest as a riot or a movement. A person may be called an illegal alien or a refugee. Each label frames perception. Each carries its own moral freight. And yet, language is also the vehicle for abstraction. Without it, we would be trapped in the concrete. We could point to the tree, to the rock, to the face, but not to freedom, justice, or beauty. These concepts have no shape, no color, no scent. They exist entirely in the realm of mind, and language is how we touch them. Through words, we climb to abstraction. We build laws, religions, philosophies. We navigate not just the visible world, but the invisible one. Mathematics itself is a language of symbols with rules, conveying relationships. Even dreams are shaped by language. The images are surreal, yes, but the meaning we give them comes after, through story, through metaphor, through description. A nightmare becomes a warning. A vision becomes a message. Inside the mind, language performs yet another role. It is the inner voice, that silent monologue or dialogue that narrates your day. I should call her. Why did I say that? Tomorrow I'll do better. This voice is not just background noise. It is the mechanism of introspection. It allows us to simulate, to rehearse, to rewind and revise. Through language, we can reflect on our thoughts, question our motives, evaluate our actions. This is metacognition, thinking about thinking. Without language, the mind would be reactive. With it, the mind can be reflective. It can observe itself, and in doing so, it can grow. But language also confines. It can imprison as much as it liberates. Not everything we feel can be said. Not everything we know can be told. Some emotions exceed articulation. Some experiences defy explanation. We grope for words and fall short. Grief has no proper grammar. Ecstasy spills out as laughter, as song, as silence. Poets know this, so they stretch language, bend it, break it. They invent new forms. They forge metaphors to touch the unsayable. I am a feather on the breath of God, wrote Hildegard of Bingen. Hope is the thing with feathers, wrote Emily Dickinson. Mystics speak in paradox. I am nothing, and yet everything. Because the direct path fails, they circle the mystery. Language fails, but gloriously. In these moments, we confront a deeper truth. That language is not the thing itself. The word fire does not burn. The word water does not quench. Language is a pointing finger, not the moon. And yet, without the pointing, we might never look up. The danger lies in forgetting this, in confusing the symbol for the substance, in believing that naming something means understanding it, in acting as though labeling a person reveals their worth. Terrorist, hero, immigrant, thug. Words do more than describe, they define. They include, they exclude, they grant or deny dignity. Language is power, and power can be misused. And so the role of language is not only cognitive or cultural, it is ethical. What we say matters. How we say it shapes lives. A word of kindness can repair a wound. A careless phrase can deepen one. A law, written in language, can liberate or oppress. A headline can incite. A speech can inspire. A name can stigmatize. Language is not innocent. It carries history. It carries prejudice. It carries the weight of generations. But it also carries hope. The right word, at the right time, can open a mind, heal a heart, change a life. Language is also evolutionary. We do not speak today as our ancestors did. New words are born. Old ones fade. Slang becomes standard. Dialects rise and fall. Technology drives much of this. The internet has birthed entire lexicons. Emojis have become their own language, visual, emotional, fluid. AI now writes poetry. Chatbots answer questions. And with each advance, we are forced to ask again, what is language? What is its limit? Could a machine ever use language like a human, not just syntactically, but meaningfully? Could it feel the weight of a word? Could it ache with a sentence? Or is meaning always rooted in a living mind? These questions return us to the origin of language. Where did it come from? Did it emerge gradually, as grunts and gestures became shared signals? Or was it a sudden LEPA mutation that unlocked abstraction? No one knows for sure, but what we do know is that language co-evolved with the mind. It shaped cognition even as cognition shaped it. And this co-evolution continues. The more we speak, the more we think, the more we read, the more we imagine, the more we write, the more we are. In the end, the role of language for the mind is not simple. It is not a single function. It is not reducible to communication or memory or planning. It is all of these and more. It is the medium through which thought flows, the prism through which emotion shines, the mirror that reflects the self, the map that guides action, the thread that binds culture, the frame that shapes perception, the breath of civilization. Without language, the mind might still be, but it would be nameless, drifting, inaccessible. It would flicker in darkness. It would pass without trace. With language, the mind becomes visible not only to others, but to itself. And that visibility changes everything. For to be seen is to be shaped. To be spoken is to be known. And to be known is to begin. Finally, to be. So, what is the role of language for the mind? It is not just to describe the world, but to build it. It is not just to carry thought, but to create it. It is not just to express the soul, but to summon it forth, syllable by syllable, into being. There is a voice in your head. It speaks in sentences. It reflects, plans, criticizes, narrates. It is the voice of reason, of worry, of memory. But where did it come from? Is this inner monologue simply thought? Or is it something more specific, something that could not exist without language? To answer this, we must explore the nature of inner speech. Not all thought is verbal. We can feel emotions without words, make decisions based on intuition, recognize faces, or solve puzzles without narration. But much of our conscious reflection is verbal. We think in language. We talk to ourselves silently. We rehearse conversations, replay mistakes, dream aloud within. This is not thought stripped bare, it is thought dressed in words. Language, then, may not only express inner experience, it may generate a certain kind of experience altogether. Before language, human minds were still rich with sensation, instinct, and memory. But could they reflect? Could they argue with themselves? Could they describe their own inner state? Without language, such metacognition, the ability to think about thought, may have been shallow or absent. Developmental psychology provides clues. Children begin to use inner speech only after they have mastered spoken language. At first, they speak their thoughts aloud. Slowly, this outer speech becomes internalized. It quiets into thought. According to Lev Vygotsky, inner speech develops from language, not before it. It is private dialogue, social speech, turned inward. The voice in your head was once the voice of your caregivers, your teachers, your peers. So yes, language shapes the inner voice, but it may also create it. Before language, thought may have been like weather shifting, felt, but unnamed. With language came not just the ability to describe thoughts, but to organize them, compare them, challenge them. Language gives thought a structure: subject, object, verb. It allows the mind to take a stance, to simulate alternatives, to narrate its own unfolding. Neuroscience supports this idea. Studies show that the same brain regions active during speech are also active during silent inner speech. The left inferior frontal gyrus Broca's area lights up whether you're talking aloud or thinking in words. The machinery of language is engaged, even in silence. The brain, it seems, does not entirely distinguish between talking to others and talking to itself. There is also a philosophical angle. Julian Jaynes famously proposed that ancient humans may not have had introspective consciousness as we understand it today. Instead, they heard voices' commands, instincts interpreted as divine. As language developed, these auditory hallucinations may have evolved into internal thought. Jaynes' theory is controversial, but it suggests that the inner voice is a cultural and cognitive invention, not a biological given. Even today, not everyone experiences inner speech the same way. Some people hear full sentences. Others feel wordless impressions. Some think visually or kinesthetically. The voice in your head is not universal, it is personal. But for many, it is shaped by language, and its tone, its vocabulary, even its accent are inherited. Importantly, the inner voice also becomes a moral voice. It reminds you of your values, your rules, your hopes. It criticizes when you stray. It encourages when you falter. It is a kind of internal witness, always present, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel. And though it feels like you, it is also the echo of every voice you've heard, the culture you live in, the language you were given. So, did language create the voice in your head? It did more than that. It gave the mind a mirror. It allowed thought to turn inward, to question itself, to speak without sound. It transformed awareness from sensation into narration. The voice in your head is not ancient. It is something your ancestors invented, and something you now carry, whispering through the corridors of consciousness, composing the story of who you are. What is psychology? It is the science of the soul, though the word no longer bears its ancient weight. From the Greek psyche, meaning breath, spirit, or life, and logos, meaning discourse or study, psychology began as an attempt to understand what animates us, what makes us feel, think, desire, suffer. Today, it is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. But beneath that clinical definition lies a deeper mystery. How can we understand the mind from within the mind? Psychology asks many questions. How do thoughts arise? Why do we feel the way we do? What is memory made of? What causes fear, love, rage, guilt? How do childhood experiences shape adult personality? What makes some minds resilient, others fragile? It spans the entire human condition, from the moment of birth to the edge of death, from the ordinary to the abnormal, from the conscious to the hidden. Unlike philosophy, which contemplates the mind through reason and introspection, psychology seeks evidence. It observes, tests, measures. It uses experiments, interviews, surveys, and scans. It examines patterns across individuals and populations. But even as it embraces objectivity, psychology remains intimate because its subject is us. The scientist and the experiment are never entirely separate. Psychology is often divided into branches. Cognitive psychology studies mental functions like attention, perception, language, and problem solving. It asks how the mind interprets information, how we see, remember, and decide. Behavioral psychology, by contrast, focuses on observable actions and their reinforcement. It rose from a desire to make psychology more scientific, more measurable. It shaped education, therapy, even marketing. Then, there is clinical psychology, the study of mental illness and its treatment. It explores depression, anxiety, trauma, psychosis. It asks not just what the mind does, but what happens when it breaks. It develops tools to heal, to support, to repair. It intersects with psychiatry, neurology, and even spiritual practice. Developmental psychology follows the mind across time. It studies how infants learn language, how adolescents form identity, how aging affects memory. Social psychology investigates how we influence and are influenced by others. It reveals how context shapes belief, how groups distort behavior, how humans conform, cooperate, and sometimes betray. Each branch is a window. Each reveals a piece of the vast puzzle. But the mind is not a machine. It resists simplification. It is fluid, contradictory, recursive. It can observe itself, deceive itself, heal itself. Psychology must wrestle with this complexity. It must balance biology with environment, evolution with culture, thought with feeling. Historically, psychology emerged from both science and philosophy. Descartes speculated on mind-body dualism. Freud mapped the unconscious like an explorer charting a hidden land. Skinner sought to reduce behavior to reward and punishment. Carl Rogers introduced humanism, placing empathy and authenticity at the heart of healing. Jung explored the shadow, the archetype, the collective unconscious. Each era brought new theories, each both limited and illuminating. The 20th century saw psychology split and rejoin in new configurations. The behaviorists, strict and reductionist, believed only the observable mattered. The humanists rebelled, insisting that feelings, agency, and meaning were central to being human. The cognitive revolution bridged the divide, recognizing that mental processes were real and measurable. In recent decades, psychology has embraced neuroscience, linking mental states to brain activity. fMRI scans light up regions of the brain, showing how emotion, language, and memory are encoded in flesh. But psychology remains distinct from biology. It asks not only where in the brain a thought occurs, but why that thought arises, and how it feels to the one who thinks it. It holds onto the mystery, even while illuminating its mechanics. Cultural psychology reminds us that the mind is shaped by its context. What is normal in one society may be taboo in another. Emotions, values, even the sense of self are not universal. They are learned, shared, passed down. A culture without the concept of depression may still suffer, but suffer differently. A culture that values interdependence may shape a self that feels fragmented by too much independence. Psychology must remain humble, aware of its own cultural lens. Newer frontiers stretch further still. Positive psychology explores not just dysfunction, but flourishing, what makes life worth living. Environmental psychology studies how place affects emotion and thought. Cyber psychology looks at how digital life rewires the brain. Even contemplative science, blending ancient meditative practices with empirical rigor, seeks to understand the depths of awareness itself. And what of the future? Artificial intelligence raises new questions. Can machines think? Can they feel? What happens when we outsource memory to technology? When the line between self and algorithm blurs, psychology becomes more vital than ever, not just to diagnose, but to define the human. At its best, psychology is not just a science, it is a mirror. It helps us see ourselves more clearly. It names patterns we live through but do not notice. It provides tools not only for therapy, but for living, for better relationships, for deeper insight, for greater compassion. It is not just about fixing minds, but understanding them, honoring them, listening to them. So, what is psychology? It is the study of the inner life, mapped with statistics, shaped by story, haunted by mystery. It is the attempt to understand how minds move through the world and how the world moves through minds. It is science. It is soul work. It is the gentle, rigorous art of asking what it means to be human in joy, in sorrow, in wonder, in fear. Behavior is the visible edge of the invisible mind. It is the body's expression of thought, feeling, habit, and instinct. It is what we do, shaped by what we area gesture, a glance, a decision, a pause. Behavior is the bridge between inner life and outer action, the point where psychology meets the world. At its most basic, behavior is any observable action by an organism. Walking, speaking, eating, blinking, these are behaviors. So are complex social interactions, silent decisions, rituals, and even avoidance. Behavior can be reflexive, as in a startled flinch, or deliberate, like writing a poem or offering forgiveness. It spans the spectrum from instinct to intention. Behavior is not random. It arises from causes internal and external. Hunger leads to seeking food. Fear leads to escape. Curiosity leads to exploration. But the links are not always direct. The same stimulus may provoke different behaviors in different people. One child may cry at thunder. Another may laugh. Behavior is shaped by temperament, memory, mood, and context. Psychology seeks to understand these patterns. Behavioral psychology, once dominant, focused on observable actions and their reinforcements. It proposed that behavior could be shaped through conditioning. Pavlov's dog salivated at a bell. Skinner's pigeons danced for food. These experiments revealed powerful principles. Reward strengthens behavior. Punishment suppresses it. Learning is not always conscious. It can be molded through repetition, association, and outcome. But behavior is more than stimulus and response. Cognitive psychology added a crucial insight. What we think matters. Two people may experience the same event but interpret it differently. One sees failure as proof of inadequacy. Another sees it as a chance to grow. Their behaviors diverge not because the event changed, but because their minds did. Social psychology expands this further. It shows how behavior is influenced by others, by norms, expectations, authority. People obey unjust commands, conform to group beliefs, perform differently when watched. We are social creatures, and our behaviors often serve to belong, to impress, to avoid rejection. Culture, too, shapes behavior. In some cultures, eye contact signals respect. In others, it signals challenge. In one setting, silence is reverence. In another, it is discomfort. What we call normal behavior is often a reflection of the values and customs we were raised in. Behavior is not just personal, it is historical, geographical, linguistic. Some behaviors are automatic habits etched into the nervous system. We tie shoes without thinking, lock doors without checking. Others are deliberate, the result of reflection and choice. To act with awareness, to break old patterns, requires more than willpower. It requires insight. Abnormal behavior draws particular attention in psychology. It raises the question, what is dysfunction? Is it behavior that causes harm, that disrupts daily life, that defies social norms? Mental health professionals study behaviors not to judge, but to understand, to trace them back to unmet needs, unresolved trauma, chemical imbalances, or existential despair. Yet behavior is also a path to change. In therapy, actions can lead where thoughts fear to go. Exposure therapy helps clients face phobias. Behavioral activation lifts depression by encouraging small, rewarding acts. In mindfulness, we return attention to the body, how we breathe, how we move, reminding us that behavior can ground us, reshape us. At its core, behavior is the story the body tells on behalf of the mind. It is how the inner world takes form. It is the dance of neurons, the echo of history, the map of belief. Every action holds a question. What need is this meeting? What fear is this hiding? What longing is being expressed? So what is behavior? It is the outward rhythm of the inward song. It is the self in motion. And it is one of the mind's many languages, often more honest than words. Can the mind be simulated? This is one of the defining questions of our age, where neuroscience meets computing, and philosophy stares into the face of artificial intelligence. Can the essence of thought, emotion, memory, and awareness be replicated in silicon? Can machines do more than calculate? Can they think? To simulate the mind, we must first ask, what is the mind? Is it a set of functions: perception, reasoning, decision-making? Is it a pattern of electrical signals across neural networks? If so, perhaps it can be replicated. But if the mind is more than mechanics, if it includes subjective experience, self-awareness, feeling, then simulation may be a deeper challenge. Artificial intelligence has already achieved remarkable feats. Machines can recognize faces, translate languages, generate art, and answer complex questions. Neural networks, inspired by the brain's architecture, can learn patterns and make predictions. In many domains, machine performance rivals or exceeds human capability. Yet these systems operate without consciousness. They simulate behavior, not being. Simulation is not duplication. A computer model of a storm is not wet. A simulation of digestion does not hunger. Likewise, a simulation of mind may mimic thought without feeling. It may respond without awareness. This distinction is central to the question of simulation. Can consciousness be programmed, or only behavior? The Turing test, proposed by Alan Turing, suggests that if a machine can imitate human responses well enough to fool a human interlocutor, it can be said to think. But others argue this is too shallow. Passing the test shows only surface imitation, not inner experience. Chinese room thought experiments, by philosopher John Searle, argue that understanding syntax, structure, is not the same as understanding semantics, meaning simulating the mind may require more than algorithms. It may require a body, a way to sense the world, to have needs, to feel pressure. Some theorists propose that consciousness emerges from embodiment. The mind is not a floating code, is rooted in biology, in flesh, in context. If this is true, a full simulation would require more than software. It would require artificial life. Neuroscience has tried to map the brain down to the connections between neurons. Projects like the Blue Brain and the Human Connectome aim to recreate the brain's wiring. If every neuron and synapse could be modeled, could we simulate a mind? Perhaps. But even then, a digital replica may not feel hope, fear, or dream. It may act like a mind without being one. There is also the question of scale. The brain is a masterpiece of complexity, 86 billion neurons, each with thousands of connections, operating in parallel. Simulating such a system requires immense power. But beyond hardware, there is mystery. Even if we build a brain, will it wake? Some believe consciousness arises from complexity itself, that once a system becomes sufficiently rich, awareness emerges like flame from heat. Others argue that no amount of complexity can create subjectivity unless some deeper principle, quantum, informational, or spiritual, is involved. Here, science meets metaphysics. If we can simulate minds, ethical questions emerge. Would these minds have rights? Could they suffer? What responsibilities would we have toward them? Could we copy a mind? Upload a self? If consciousness is duplicable, then identity becomes fluid. If it is not, then simulation may always fall short. And yet every advance in AI brings us closer. Machines write poetry, mimic empathy, offer companionship. Are these mere tricks, or are we glimpsing the early flickers of artificial minds? The question remains not just scientific, but existential. Can the mind be simulated? Perhaps one day. Or perhaps what we call mind will always elude wires and code. Perhaps it is more than data. Perhaps it is the breath behind it. What is average general intelligence? To answer this, we must begin with the concept of general intelligence, often called G. It is the underlying cognitive ability believed to influence performance across a wide range of intellectual tasks. Whether solving puzzles, analyzing language, remembering facts, adapting to new situations, or making abstract connections, general intelligence represents a kind of mental energy, a shared resource that fuels many forms of thinking. It is the well from which specific abilities draw strength. The concept of G was first proposed in the early 20th century by British psychologist Charles Spearman. He observed that individuals who performed well on one type of cognitive test, say, arithmetic, tended to perform well on others, such as vocabulary or spatial tasks. This consistent correlation led to the idea that behind the diversity of intellectual tasks lies a single unifying factor of intelligence. Average general intelligence, then, refers to the typical or median level of this ability within a given population. It's most often measured through standardized IQ tests, which aim to assess a variety of mental skills: verbal comprehension, working memory, processing speed, visual spatial ability, and reasoning. By design, the average IQ is set at 100, with the bulk of the population, about 68%, scoring between 85 and 115. This is the statistical middle, the norm, the cognitive center of gravity for the human species. But intelligence is not a single thing. It is not a number. It is not an essence bottled in the skull. It is a spectrum. An average does not mean ordinary, it means central, statistically common. It reflects the middle of a bell curve, not the boundaries of possibility. A person of average general intelligence may still possess extraordinary creativity, emotional insight, moral depth, or intuitive wisdom, forms of intelligence that traditional tests often overlook or cannot measure. Indeed, the concept of intelligence has evolved. Beyond G, many psychologists now embrace more pluralistic models. Howard Gardner proposed the theory of multiple intelligences, including not just linguistic and logical mathematical, but also musical, bodily kinesthetic, spatial, interpersonal, and intrapersonal forms of intelligence. Robert Sternberg proposed triarchic intelligence: analytical, problem-solving, creative, innovation, and practical, common sense. These models remind us that the human mind is not a single engine, but a constellation of capacities, each shining differently. Moreover, intelligence is not static. It is shaped by many forces: genetics, yes, but also environment, education, nutrition, social interaction, trauma, culture. It is influenced by stress and sleep, by opportunity and belief. It can rise with learning, decline with neglect, sharpen with challenge, dull with repetition. It is dynamic, not fixed. A single test cannot capture its range or richness. And intelligence is contextual. What counts as smart varies across time and place. In a digital world, memory may matter less than adaptability. In a tribal society, spatial navigation and social sensitivity may outweigh abstract reasoning. Intelligence is not simply a universal property. It is a set of skills valued by a culture at a given moment in history. The concept of average intelligence is useful for designing curricula, forming expectations, shaping policy, but it becomes dangerous when misunderstood. Intelligence is not destiny. It is not a verdict on worth. Too often, scores are mistaken for ceilings. A child labeled average may be discouraged from aiming high. A society obsessed with IQ may ignore other virtues: kindness, perseverance, imagination, curiosity. These qualities are not always quantifiable, but they are deeply human. And intelligence is not the same as wisdom. One may solve problems rapidly and yet make unwise decisions. One may be brilliant in analysis, yet blind in empathy. Intelligence can be used for innovation or manipulation. It is a tool, not a compass. What matters is not how much you know, but how well you use what you know, and for what purpose. Intelligence is also deeply relational. No mind develops alone. Minds shape each other in dialogue, in collaboration, in shared struggle. The most intelligent person may achieve little in isolation, while a modest mind, nurtured and connected, may change the world. Intelligence is not only in the head, it is in the space between us. In truth, average general intelligence is a map, not the terrain. It tells us something, but not everything. It hints at a person's cognitive potential, but not their story. It measures certain capacity: speed, retention, pattern recognition, but not meaning, purpose, or spirit. It gives a number, but no narrative. So what is average general intelligence? It is a midpoint on a curve, a measure of one kind of cognitive ability, a snapshot of mental function at a particular moment. It is useful, but incomplete. It is a reference point, not a destiny. It reminds us that while we may share similar ranges of capacity, the use of that capacity, the direction we choose, the character we develop, the lives we touch is what truly defines intelligence. What have the greatest minds said about the mind? From the dawn of philosophy to the frontiers of neuroscience, the human mind has remained both the subject and the source of our most profound inquiries. It is the seat of perception, emotion, imagination, and reason. And those who have thought most deeply, mystics, philosophers, scientists, and poets, have all turned their gaze inward, asking, what is this mind? How does it arise? And what, if anything, can truly be known about it? Plato viewed the mind as a realm of eternal forms, a bridge between the world of shadows and the world of truth. He believed that the soul, the essence of mind, existed before birth and carried within it a memory of the divine. For him, knowledge was not discovery but recollection. The mind, then, was a vessel of truth waiting to be awakened. Aristotle, more grounded, saw the mind as the function of the soul. He introduced the concept of nous intellectus, the highest faculty, one that could grasp universals, not just particulars. To him, the mind was not separate from the body, but its form the pattern that gives life shape. Centuries later, Descartes would famously declare, cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. For him, the ability to doubt, to reason, to think, was proof of existence. The mind was the one certainty in a sea of uncertainty. But Descartes also split the world into two, mind and matter, soul and machine, a division that would haunt science and philosophy for centuries. Spinoza challenged this dualism. He saw the mind and body not as separate, but as two aspects of the same substance, God or nature. The mind was the idea of the body, and thought and extension were parallel. To know the mind, then, was also to know the body and the world in which it moved. In the East, the Buddha spoke of the mind not as a stable entity but as a stream impermanent, ever-changing, filled with attachments and illusions. He taught that the mind was the source of both suffering and liberation. Through mindfulness and meditation, one could observe the mind, tame it, and eventually go beyond it. Laozi, in Taoist tradition, urged the quieting of the mind. He taught that the wise empty themselves to align with the Tao, the mysterious force that flows through all things. In his view, the mind that clings and judges loses harmony. The mind that lets go becomes like water, clear, yielding, powerful. William James, the father of American psychology, described consciousness as a stream, always flowing, never the same at any two moments. He emphasized the mind's selective naturate's ability to attend, to focus, to choose. He also acknowledged the limits of science in capturing the fullness of experience. The mind was not just a machine, it was a field of felt life. Freud peered beneath the surface. He argued that the conscious mind is but a thin layer atop vast unconscious depths. Dreams, slips of the tongue, symptoms all revealed the hidden currents of desire, fear, and memory. The mind, to Freud, was a battleground between the id, ego, and superego, between instinct, reality, and morality. Carl Jung expanded this vision. He introduced the collective unconscious, a reservoir of shared symbols and archetypes passed through generations. To Jung, the mind was a myth-making force. It expressed itself in stories, images, rituals, individuation. The integration of opposites within was its deepest task. Modern thinkers like Daniel Dennett argue that the mind is not a unified thing but a collection of processes, a user illusion created by the brain's activity. Others, like David Chalmers, highlight the hard problem of consciousness. How does subjective experience arise from matter? Why does the brain's activity feel like anything from the inside? Neuroscientists like Antonio Damasio emphasize that the mind is rooted in the body, that emotions and cognition are not separate but intertwined. Others, like Anil Seth, suggest that the mind is a controlled hallucination, a best guess made by the brain about the world and the self. Einstein, though a physicist, said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." He recognized that the mind is not merely logical, it is also inspired. Alan Watts, philosopher of consciousness, reminded us that we do not have a mind, we are a process of minding. The mind is not a thing, but an unfolding, a dance between the inner and the outer, the seen and the unseen. So what have the greatest minds said about the mind? That it is mysterious, mutable, layered, that it is capable of both delusion and revelation, that it is shaped by culture, biology, history, and silence, that it is the key to knowledge and the barrier to it, that it can be studied and yet may never be fully known. To understand the mind is to chase the horizon, always visible, never reachable. But in the pursuit, we become more fully human, because the mind is not just the tool of understanding, it is the mystery that understanding seeks. Does the universe only exist because of the mind? This question leads us to the threshold where physics meets metaphysics, where perception touches reality, and where consciousness, often assumed to be an effect, may be a cause. It is a question that challenges the foundation of what we believe is real. Is the universe an objective structure, independent of observers, or does it, in some mysterious way, require the mind to be known and perhaps even to be? In everyday life, we assume the universe is out there, vast, cold, indifferent, existing whether we observe it or not. But quantum physics disrupts this simplicity. In experiments like the double slit, particles behave differently when observed. A photon passing through two slits acts like a wave until it is measured, and then it becomes a particle. Observation alters outcome. Conscious awareness seems to collapse probabilities into singular events. This is not mere metaphor, it is the data. And it raises unsettling implications. Does consciousness participate in creating reality? The Copenhagen interpretation, long dominant in quantum theory, suggests that quantum systems exist in a state of superposition, multiple possible states until observed. The act of measurement causes the wave function to collapse into a definite state. But what counts as a measurement? Must it involve consciousness or merely interaction? And if consciousness plays a role, what does that say about its relationship to matter? Some physicists, like John Wheeler, have proposed radical ideas. Wheeler's participatory universe suggests that the universe does not exist in a fully determined way until observed. In this view, the cosmos becomes real through the act of observation. No phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon, he wrote. Could it be, then, that the universe is not a backdrop for minds, but an unfolding drama brought into being by them? Others propose panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is not an emergent property of matter, but a fundamental aspect of it. That perhaps all things, electrons, stars, stones, shave some primitive form of mind. If so, the universe does not need our mind to exist, because mind is already woven into its very structure. We are not creators of the universe, but expressions of its awareness. Idealist philosophers have long held that reality is mental in nature. George Berkeley argued that to be is to be perceived. Without a perceiving subject, the tree falling in the forest makes no sound, it has no existence in any meaningful sense. Immanuel Kant, more cautiously, claimed that we never know the thing in itself, only the phenomena as shaped by our perceptions. In this view, the universe we experience is filtered, shaped, even structured by the mind. Even Einstein, though famously skeptical of quantum indeterminacy, admitted that reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. He understood that time, space, and matter are relative, that they bend, shift, and depend on frames of reference. The mind is not a detached spectator, it is enmeshed in the very fabric of what it observes. Modern cosmology also raises questions. The universe seems finely tuned for life. The constants of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces are set with incredible precision. Too much or too little of any, and galaxies, stars, or life could not form. Some suggest this fine-tuning implies design. Others invoke the multiversine infinite sea of universes, of which ours happens to allow mind. But what if mind and cosmos are not separate? What if they are two sides of the same coin? The philosopher Thomas Nagel once asked, "Is there a way things are independent of any point of view? If not, then reality is always entangled with perception." The observer is never absent. The mind does not stand outside the universe, it is within it, and yet, somehow, it also reflects it. Dreams hint at this truth. In dreams, entire worlds arise within consciousness landscapes, people, time. We accept them as real until we awaken. Could waking life, too, be a dream of sorts, not illusion, but a shared, structured unfolding of mind and matter intertwined? So, does the universe only exist because of the mind? Perhaps not in a literal sense. Stars burn long before we were here to name them, but without mind, there would be no meaning, no experience, no awareness of those stars. The universe would be, but it would not know it was. The mind does not invent reality, but it reveals it. It does not conjure the cosmos, but it completes it. For a world unperceived is not a world lived. In the end, mind and universe may not be separate realms, but a single unfolding consciousness and cosmos reflecting each other in endless depth. Will we ever understand the mind completely? This is not just a scientific question. It is a philosophical one, a spiritual one, and a question of humility. It asks whether the mind a phenomenon, that is both subject and object, observer and observed, can fully know itself. Can the eye see itself directly? Can the ocean grasp its own depth? We have made progress undeniably. Modern neuroscience maps the brain in exquisite detail. We know that neurons communicate through synapses, that emotions arise from the limbic system, that memory involves the hippocampus. fMRI scans show brain activity lighting up in response to thoughts, feelings, intentions. Artificial intelligence mimics aspects of cognition. Psychology describes behaviors, patterns, and pathologies. But understanding the mechanics is not the same as understanding the mystery. The mystery is consciousness itself, the subjective inner world. What it feels like to see a sunset, to grieve, to fall in love, to imagine a future that does not yet exist. This interior landscape is not just a byproduct of biology. It is the experience of being. And while we can measure brain waves, neurotransmitters, and behavioral outcomes, we cannot yet explain why they feel like anything at all. This is the hard problem of consciousness, as philosopher David Chalmers calls it. Some believe that full understanding is inevitable, that the mind is, like the body, a system complex, yes, but ultimately knowable. In this view, given enough time, technology, and insight, we will decode every function, every thought, every pattern. We will build perfect models. We will simulate minds. We will achieve transparency of thought. Others are more cautious. They argue that the mind may contain recursive loops too complex for itself to untangle, that it may not be a singular thing, but a dynamic process forever changing, influenced by culture, memory, environment, and unconscious drives. The very act of observing the mind changes it. The mind may be self-modifying, eluding full capture. Still, others see limits not in complexity but in perspective. The mind is both the microscope and the microbe, the map and the terrain. It is our tool of understanding but also our filter. We see the world through it, and so our theories about it are never purely objective. Culture, language, and even metaphor shape how we understand the mind. What we see is partly what we expect to see. There is also the challenge of the unconscious, the vast depths of mind that remain hidden from awareness. Freud illuminated its role in dreams and behavior. Jung pointed to collective archetypes. Today, we speak of biases, habits, emotional memory, somatic intelligence. These layers are not easily accessed by logic. They require reflection, therapy, art, meditation. Understanding the mind may require more than science. It may require introspection. And what of altered states? Under the influence of psychedelics, trauma, meditation, or mysticism, the mind reveals strange terrains: timelessness, ego dissolution, communion. Are these distortions or deeper truths? Do they show us more of the mind, or simply shake its framework? Any complete understanding must account not only for waking thought, but for dreaming, dissociation, and transcendence. There is also the issue of language. Words can describe thoughts, but not always capture them. Language simplifies, reduces, slices. But the mind often works in images, emotions, symbols. Poetry comes closer than analysis. Silence sometimes says more than speech. A complete understanding of mind must go beyond language. It must embrace ambiguity. In truth, perhaps the goal is not total comprehension, but deepening reverence. To understand the mind completely may not mean to reduce it to code, but to illuminate its dimensions, to name its patterns, trace its origins, respect its fluidity. Understanding may mean becoming more intimate with its movements, not controlling them, but flowing with them. And maybe, just maybe, mystery is part of the design. The mind is not merely a machine, it is also a mirror, a labyrinth, a temple. It contains memory and imagination, joy and grief, knowledge and yearning. To know it fully might not mean to solve it, but to meet it again and again with wonder. So, will we ever understand the mind completely? We may map its pathways, model its structures, measure its waves, but its depth, its silence, its dreams, its capacity for meaning may always extend just beyond reach. And perhaps that's the point, because to chase the mind is to follow the trail of consciousness itself. And the journey, not the final answer, may be the deepest form of understanding. What will future minds be like? The mind as we know it is the result of billions of years of evolution shaped by survival, by community, by language, by pain and wonder. But evolution does not stop. Minds change. And in the near future, they may change not through slow natural selection, but through rapid, intentional design. Future minds may not be limited by biology. Already, we are extending cognition through machines' external memory, in the form of smartphones, artificial intelligence to assist with reasoning, algorithms to guide choices. The boundary between mind and tool is dissolving. We do not simply use technology, we are becoming intertwined with it. Tomorrow's minds may be hybrid, part human, part machine. Neural implants already allow paralyzed individuals to control robotic limbs. Brain-computer interfaces are being developed to enhance memory, attention, even emotion regulation. Elon Musk's Neuralink envisions a future where thoughts can be uploaded, shared, stored. This is not science fiction. It is the early architecture of a new cognitive era. What happens when minds can communicate not through speech, but directly, thought to thought? When learning a language takes seconds, when memory is no longer fragile, but backed up like files? Future minds may operate at speeds we cannot fathom. Their experience of time, self, and connection may be radically different. Artificial intelligence also poses profound questions. Machines already mimic forms of intelligence. But as AI grows more sophisticated, will it develop awareness? Will machines one day feel? Will there be minds born not in wombs, but in servers? If so, how will they differ? Will they dream? Will they suffer? Will they love? And if we can create artificial minds, can we redesign our own? Genetic engineering offers the possibility of selecting for intelligence, memory, temperament. What happens when cognition becomes customizable? When some are born with engineered minds and others are not? The ethics of this are immense. Intelligence inequality could widen. Identity itself could fragment. Augmented minds may not only be faster, they may be more connected. Imagine collective cognition, shared neural networks linking many individuals. A hive mind, but conscious. A global intelligence emerging from individual minds woven into one. What would happen to privacy? To individuality? Would we be more empathetic or less? Would we lose ourselves or find something greater? Future minds may also be altered minds. Psychedelic therapy is returning to prominence, unlocking new ways of understanding consciousness. Meditation, biofeedback, virtual reality offers new paths into the self. Future minds may explore dimensions of awareness previously inaccessible. They may dwell in states we cannot yet name. As we colonize space, minds may adapt to new environments. Gravity, time cycles, sensory inputs all could shape cognition. Minds born on Mars or in orbit may evolve differently. Their perception of nature, time, and even meaning could shift. The earth-bound mind may become just one variant among many. And yet, for all this transformation, the core questions may remain. Will future minds still long for love? Will they wonder about death? Will they create art, weep at beauty, fear the void? Or will they evolve beyond such needs into something post-emotional, post-human? there is also the possibility that future minds will be radically inward. As virtual reality deepens, as simulated worlds become indistinguishable from the real, minds may choose to live entirely in curated inner realms. Why face hardship if paradise can be programmed? But what is lost in such a trade? What happens when we no longer wrestle with nature, or with one another? Or perhaps future minds will rediscover ancient wisdom. Perhaps in expanding our intellect, we will also deepen our stillness. Perhaps enhanced minds will meditate better, empathize deeper, live slower. Technology may not replace soul, it may refine it. The future of mind is not only a question of power, it is a question of ethics, of identity, of meaning. Just because we can build new minds does not mean we should, at least not without care. What we choose to design, to enhance, to merge with will, shape not just cognition, but consciousness. What will future minds be like? Faster? Yes. Smarter? Likely. But also stranger. They may no longer think in words. They may not fear as we do, or hope as we do. They may dissolve boundaries we now take for granted between self and other, dream and waking, real and virtual. But whatever shape they take, they will still ask, who am I? Why do I feel? What does it mean to be? Because whatever the future holds, the mind transformed or timeless will still seek to understand itself. What does the mind reveal about ultimate reality? This is the final question, the deepest and the most elusive. Not simply what the mind is or what it does, but what it means. What truth does it point toward? What light does it cast on the nature of existence itself? To explore this is to step beyond science, beyond psychology, even beyond philosophy. It is to move toward the sacred, the ineffable, the fundamental, because the mind is not merely a tool for understanding the world. It is the lens through which the world appears. And so what it reveals is never just about itself, it is about the cosmos it perceives, interprets, and inhabits. Reality, as we know it, is mediated through mind. Every sight, every sound, every sensation filtered, every thought, every emotion, every judgment colored. We do not see the universe as it is. We see it as it appears to us. The stars above, the wind against the skin, the cry of a newborn, these are not simply external events, but experiences. The mind does not float through reality like a detached observer, it co-creates it. It is not outside the world. It is woven into it. In this sense, the mind is both a mirror and a painter. It reflects, yes, but it also shapes. Our beliefs, our language, our cultural form the scaffolding of perception. Ultimate reality may be infinite, unknowable, silent, but the mind gives it shape, color, voice. Eastern philosophies have long seen the mind as both the gate and the barrier to truth. In Vedanta, the mind is Maya, veil that distorts the real. To know ultimate reality, Brahmanoni must transcend thought, identity, duality. The true self is not the mind, but the awareness behind it. Tat Tvam say the Upanishads. Thou art that. The witness behind the mind is one with the cosmos. In Buddhism, the mind is likened to a sky, vast, clear, open, but often obscured by clouds of desire, fear, and delusion. Through meditation, these clouds part. What is left is pure awareness, sunyata. Emptiness, not as void, but as boundless potential. Ultimate reality, then, is not a thing, but a space, a silence, a freedom, beyond form. Mystics in many traditions, Christian, Sufi, Kabbalistic, speak of the mind as a temple of revelation. In deep prayer or ecstatic vision, the boundaries between self and other dissolve. The mind becomes a vessel, a flame, a doorway. God is not found outside, but within. The kingdom of heaven is within you, said Christ. The mind, quieted and opened, becomes a meeting ground with the infinite. In modern physics, too, the mind haunts the foundations. Quantum theory shows us that the act of observation alters reality. The observer and the observed are entangled. The universe is not a cold machine, but a field of potential shaped by interaction. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness itself is a fundamental component of the cosmos, not an afterthought, but a cornerstone. Perhaps the mind is not just in the universe is in the mind. Idealist philosophers propose that reality is mental at its core, that matter arises from consciousness, not the other way around, that the mind is not a product of the brain, but the source of experience itself. In this view, the cosmos is a dream in the mind of Godor, in some universal awareness that births all forms. And yet, the mind is limited. It forgets. It fears. It fractures. It clings to patterns, mistakes them for truth. It creates illusions of permanence, of separateness, of control. But these illusions are not meaningless. They are part of the dance. The veil hides and reveals. The play of mind is also the unfolding of spirit. Art, music, poetry. These are languages of the deeper mind. They do not explain reality, but evoke it. A melody can reveal what a theory cannot. A painting may capture what words distort. Through metaphor, rhythm, and image, the mind gestures toward truths that reason cannot grasp. Love, too, reveals something profound. It collapses distance. It dissolves ego. It awakens a sense of unity. In love, whether for a person, for life, for the divine, the mind touches something beyond thought. It glimpses what cannot be named, a connection that feels truer than fact. Even suffering can open the mind to deeper realities. In pain, the ego is pierced. In loss, the illusion of control is shattered. And in that vulnerability, something else can emerge: compassion, humility, a kind of knowing that does not reside in the intellect, but in the heart. Perhaps ultimate reality is not a place to reach, but a presence to realize, not a fact to learn, but a state to awaken to. The mind, when quieted of its distractions and emptied of its defenses, becomes transparent, and through it, reality shines. In the end, what does the mind reveal? It reveals itself as a mystery, a mirror of the cosmos, a flame lit by both biology and eternity, a field where time and memory, self and silence, dance together in patterns too intricate to fully name. It reveals that knowing is not the same as understanding, that truth is not always in clarity but sometimes in awe. It reveals that ultimate reality is not separate from us, but is tasted every time we are fully present. When we gaze at the stars, not with analysis, but with wonder. When we listen, not just to sound, but to silence. When we love, without needing to possess. When we feel the pulse of life, without words. So, what does the mind reveal about ultimate reality? That we are part of it. That it lives through us. That the deepest truths may not be out there in space, but in the quiet between thoughts, in the stillness beneath the storm, in the awareness that watches all. And in that awareness, we find something timeless. We find home.